The story begins high above the world, where a violent rupture splits the clear sky, forming a towering crimson fissure that glows as something alien forces its way into the world. The rupture fully opens into a gate, its red light flooding the sky and abruptly ending the era of normalcy as disaster begins. Monsters surge out of the gate in endless waves, swarming the air and crashing into the city below, turning streets into instant war zones. Gigantic beasts rampage through the city, crushing vehicles and bodies alike as fire and blood cover the streets with no hope of escape. Mid the collapse of the world, some humans awaken to power. These chosen individuals manifest supernatural abilities, their bodies surrounded by flames, energy, or force shaped by mana. They stand against the monsters, wielding strength that did not exist before, marking the birth of hunters, humans whose awakened mana allows them to fight back against the beings that emerged from what would later be called the demon realm. Hunter strikes decisively, cutting through the darkness and signaling that humanity has stopped fleeing and begun its counteroffensive. Time passes and the world rebuilds, with cities rising from ruins and civilization slowly taking shape once again. Life regains stability, but the danger never fully fades, leaving humanity in a constant state of uneasy survival. That fragile peace breaks as monsters attack again, swarming a lone hunter who braces behind his shield against relentless blows. The hunter fights back desperately, unaware of a massive monster looming behind him, a grim reminder that the monsters still outnumber those who stand against them. A hunter is violently struck down, his body smashed into the ground as blood sprays, revealing how fragile even awakened warriors truly are. The harsh truth settles in: natural awakenings are too rare, and too many hunters die to keep pace with the monsters. Faced with mounting losses, humanity makes a desperate choice, turning to forbidden methods to survive amid the ruins. Artificial life is born, an inhuman figure with glowing red eyes moving with mechanical precision, created through technology and mana rather than nature. These creations are called Chimera Hunters, forged through cruel experiments that treat humans and animals as materials, exposing the dark cost behind humanity's fight for survival. Humanity widens its approach, harvesting gate minerals and monster cells to study and repurpose their unnatural properties. In sealed laboratories, brutal experiments continue amid broken bodies and failed trials, as survival takes precedence over restraint. Success is achieved when a stable chimera form develops inside a containment tank, turning desperate experiments into a repeatable process. Scientists and hunters unite, their cooperation improving survival rates and allowing chimera hunters to save countless lives. With threats held at bay, rebuilding accelerates, and the world slowly regains stability, allowing humanity to endure once more. Decades later, the age of open disaster has passed into history, but danger has not vanished. Beneath a peaceful night sky, an illegal chimera laboratory continues to operate in secret, untouched by regulation and hidden far from public view. Deep underground, the facility is revealed as a high-security containment zone for powerful chimera subjects. Two researchers walk the dim corridor, their footsteps echoing as they perform a routine inspection before ending their shift. As they pass one containment cell, tension rises. One researcher slows down, troubled by subject number 17, whose arm shows abnormal deterioration that does not match prior damage reports. The second researcher dismisses the concern and steps closer to the cell, shining a light inside. He insists the chimera poses no threat, explaining that it is immobilized and incapable of acting without direct orders. Inside the cell, number 17 lies bound in chains amid dried blood from earlier experiments. Its damaged arm lies motionless on the floor, but the stillness breaks when one eye opens, sharp and aware, revealing consciousness where none was expected. The researchers decide to leave. One of them suggests ending the inspection, convinced that the specimen's condition has deteriorated beyond recovery and that termination is inevitable. Chains rattle softly as they turn away, the sound echoing through the holding area while they retreat down the corridor. Holding cell is left behind in silence. Number 17 remains sprawled on the blood-stained floor, bound behind iron bars, its body motionless once more. The corridor lights fade with distance as the researchers' footsteps grow faint, leaving only the dim illumination cast across the cage. Elsewhere in the facility, the matter is discussed formally. In the research lab president's office, the conclusion is stated with finality. Number 17 is beyond saving. The assessment is clinical, detached, and absolute, reducing the Chimera's existence to a failed result. The extent of the damage is laid out. Its body has been pushed far past its limits, surviving only because of its abnormal construction. Any ordinary specimen would have perished long ago under the same conditions, making its continued survival an anomaly rather than a success. Remaining lifespan is estimated. At most, the Chimera is expected to last another month. The researchers acknowledge this prognosis without hesitation, accepting the outcome and closing the discussion, leaving number 17's fate sealed by indifference and routine. The decision is finalized without hesitation. The lab president orders that number 17 be deployed in the next mission to seal a newly emerged gate. Rather than preservation or recovery, its remaining existence is repurposed as a disposable shield meant to buy time for others. Further instructions are added with deliberate care. The Chimera is to protect the hunters during their retreat, functioning solely as a barrier between humans and the monsters. At the same time, a crucial condition is imposed. No command is to be issued for its return. Mission unfolded within the demon realm, in a rugged mountain region carved by jagged stone and hostile terrain. The air itself felt oppressive, thick with mana and danger. Chimera number 17 was released into this environment as a disposable shield, thrown forward to face whatever awaited beyond the gate. A monstrous presence answered immediately. A massive creature descended with a deafening force, its body cutting through the air as it launched an attack. Its roar tore through the rocky expanse, announcing overwhelming strength and intent to kill. As the enemy bore down on it, Chimera number 17's battered body reacted. Power stirred within its ruined frame, and its clawed hand tightened, muscles twitching as it prepared to move. Despite broken flesh and a fate already decided, its body still responded to battle, rising to meet the threat before it. The battle erupted in full force. The airborne monster lashed out, its body cutting through the blood-red sky as streaks of destructive power tore downward. Chimera number 17 met the assault head-on, its ruined body moving with feral precision as it slashed upward again and again, carving through the incoming attack despite wounds that should have left it unable to stand. Clash shattered the ground. Explosive force rippled outward from the point of impact, sending debris and fragments flying across the rocky terrain. At the center of the destruction, Chimera number 17 was driven into the earth, leaving a circular crater etched into the stone, its body momentarily swallowed by dust and shockwaves. The enemy roared in response, its massive form descending with crushing intent. Its mouth opened wide, revealing layers of flesh and fangs as it bore down on the battered Chimera below. The air trembled under its weight, and the surrounding land cracked further as the monster pressed its advantage. Before the blow could end it, Chimera number 17 moved again. Its clawed limbs dug into the shattered ground, gripping fractured stone as it forced its body upward. Bones creaked, torn flesh stretched, and blood spilled, but its form did not collapse. Instead, it rose, defying the damage inflicted upon it. With a sudden surge, Chimera number 17 launched itself skyward. Its body tore free from the crater and shot upward in a single violent motion, closing the distance between itself and the towering monster. The unexpected counter shocked the enemy, marking the moment when what was meant to be a disposable shield proved it still possessed the will and strength to fight back. The clash reached a violent crescendo. Chimera number 17 tore through the enemy's attack, its movements leaving blazing arcs that carved through flesh and power alike. Pieces of the monster were severed and flung away as the Chimera drove forward without hesitation, its body moving as if pain and damage no longer mattered. Impact shattered the battlefield. Massive chunks of scorched stone and glowing fragments rained down as the force of the exchange collapsed inward. At the center of the devastation, Chimera number 17 stood amid cracked ground and spreading blood, having forced the enemy's assault to break apart entirely. The monster let out a final, distorted cry as energy surged violently through its body. Light gathered and then detonated, the discharge tearing through the air before dissipating in a storm of sparks and debris. What remained of the creature was no longer capable of fighting back. The dust and light finally cleared, the battlefield fell into a tense silence. Chimera number 17 stood alone beneath a torn sky, lightning fading as it crackled away into nothing. From a distance, a group of hunters watched, stunned by what they had just witnessed, their attention fixed on the lone figure at the center of the destruction. The hunters slowly took in the aftermath. Every hostile presence had been erased in a single overwhelming exchange, exactly as expected from an S-class Chimera Hunter. Blood-stained ground stretched between them and the Chimera, marking the cost of the battle and confirming that the disposable weapon they had relied on was far more powerful than they had anticipated. Attention returned to the still-open gate. One of the hunters questioned whether it could truly be closed, frustration evident after days of repeated attempts. The swirling mass of the gate continued to churn in front of them, staining the battlefield with heat, smoke, and blood. Despite lingering doubt, confidence held. With the S-class Chimera still fighting, the hunters believed they couldn't be overwhelmed, no matter how many monsters emerged. They trusted its sheer power to keep the horde in check. Then the ground shuddered violently. A deep rumble tore upward as something enormous broke through from below, ripping the earth apart in a jagged layer and sending stone and debris exploding outward, announcing a new, far greater threat. One of the hunters reacted instantly. Gripping his weapon, he stepped forward and cut down a smaller monster that lunged in the chaos. The strike was clean and precise, dealing with what slipped past the Chimera's reach. At the same time, the gate itself began to destabilize. Its swirling energy twisted inward, light warping and collapsing as the vortex shrank. The violent motion slowed, signaling that the hunters' efforts were finally taking effect and that the gate was on the verge of closing. Confirmation finally arrived. The signal indicating the red gate's closure was verified, cutting through the tension that had gripped the battlefield. The hunters straightened as the meaning settled in. This long operation was finally reaching its end. Orders followed immediately. The team was instructed to fall back and exit through the gate while it was still stable. Boots dug into the dirt as they turned to move, urgency replacing exhaustion now that survival was assured. As they withdrew, a violent collision erupted behind them. Chimera number 17 slammed into a massive remaining monster, the impact cracking armor like flesh and sending shockwaves through the ground. The creature reeled under the blow, its resistance collapsing in a single decisive exchange. The hunters ran, glancing back only briefly. One of them hesitated, questioning whether they should retrieve the Chimera now that the gate was closing. The hesitation was cut short by the reminder of their standing orders. They were not to bring it back. Understanding followed, grim and matter-of-fact. The Chimera was considered a doomed asset, valuable but expendable, expected to perish soon regardless. As the hunters continued their retreat, Chimera number 17 remained behind, locked in combat as the closing gate and fading battlefield sealed its fate. As they ran, one of the hunters admitted an uneasiness that lingered despite the successful withdrawal. Leaving the Chimera behind weighed on them, especially knowing how many lives had been spared because it held the line when no one else could. That hesitation was met with a cold response. The Chimera was dismissed as something barely alive, a tool created only to obey commands and activate spells when ordered. Any sense of guilt, they insisted, was unnecessary. Behind them, Chimera number 17 continued to fight alone. Its glowing eye narrowed as another monster closed in, its massive claw driving forward. The Chimera met the attack head-on, blood spraying as it caught the blow without retreating. The exchange turned violent and brutal. Flesh tore, force collided, and the Chimera was driven backward under the weight of the impact. Even so, it did not fall. Wounds deepened, but its body remained upright, continuing to move through sheer persistence. A system directive echoed through its consciousness, clear and absolute. The mission would end only once the hunter's escape was fully secured. Surrounded by enemies and bleeding heavily, Chimera number 17 pressed on, bound to its final purpose as the last defender standing. Massive monster surged forward, its bulk tearing through the battlefield with unstoppable momentum. Its body slammed across the ground, scattering debris and foul fluids as it charged straight at Chimera number 17, intent on crushing what still stood in its way. Before the impact could fully land, a violent surge of power erupted. Lightning-like energy descended in a blinding strike, crashing into the battlefield with overwhelming force. The explosion swallowed the area, drowning out everything else as raw energy tore through monster and terrain alike. As the light faded, a system directive surfaced within the Chimera's consciousness. The message was brief and absolute, demanding acknowledgement. It pressed down like an order etched into its very being, leaving no room for refusal or misunderstanding. Another command followed immediately, colder and more final than the last. Once the mission concluded, return was no longer required. The instructions severed any remaining expectation of survival, defining the Chimera's role with ruthless clarity. The meaning settled in completely. Chimera number 17 was not meant to leave once its task was finished. As energy dissipated and silence crept back over the battlefield, the order remained. This was the end, and there would be no return after the mission was complete. System registered the final condition of the mission. The exit was marked as secured, and the confirmation lingered without emotion. Nearby, the ruined remains of monsters lay scattered across the battlefield, their bodies twisted and broken where they had fallen. A new command surfaced, brief and mechanical, instructing a return. For a fleeting moment, the word carried the suggestion of release, as if there were still a path back from this place. That expectation was immediately denied. The system overrode itself with a colder message, declaring the return unauthorized. The contradiction settled heavily, stripping away any illusion of survival that might have remained. The aftermath of the mission was laid out in stark terms. The land was carpeted with monster corpses, proof of overwhelming slaughter. The count followed, precise and merciless, recording the sheer scale of destruction left behind. The Chimera Hunter Number 17's body began to fail, its awareness drifted. In the fading moments of its existence, a memory surfaced, something absent from the system's records. It recalled a distant past when it had been human, taken away as a child at 9 years old, long before it was reduced to a numbered weapon and sent to die. The fragment of memory deepened, pulling him away from the battlefield and into something older and unfamiliar. The recollection began quietly, as if opening a long-sealed door, and the weight of it pressed in all at once. The past took shape decades earlier. A modest building stood in stillness, identified as an orphanage in a numbered district. Inside, a small child cried softly while being held, the sound fragile and unguarded, untouched by the violence that would later define his existence. Time moved forward within the memory. The boy had grown older, sitting alone as an adult figure stood before him, correcting him sternly. The child said nothing in response, his silence heavy with confusion rather than defiance. Another moment followed, sharper and more abrupt. A door was slammed shut with force, cutting off warmth and safety in an instant. Snow drifted outside, cold seeping in as separation replaced any sense of belonging. The memory ended without comfort. The door remained closed, and the child was left behind as the moment froze in his mind. It was not a lesson or a punishment that lingered most strongly, but the quiet certainty that this was the beginning of being discarded. The memory continued without mercy. In the cold outside the orphanage, the boy stood alone as words of rejection echoed in his mind. Snow drifted down around him, settling on his clothes and skin as the building behind him remained closed, silent, and unwilling to take him back. His legs gave out on the frozen ground. He collapsed into the snow, the shock knocking the breath from his body. The world blurred as cold seeped through him, his small frame unable to withstand the exposure or the fear pressing down on him. Voices approached, not with concern but with calculation. From a distance, adults observed him as something discarded rather than someone in need. They spoke casually about how easily children like him could be found in the streets, treating his suffering as an opportunity. The memory shifted again, dragging him into a sterile, lightless room. He was restrained on a metal table, limbs bound, mouth sealed, wires and restraints fastened to his body. A needle descended, and something cold was forced into his veins as his eyes stared helplessly upward. Around him, figures in white coats discussed him without using his name. He was identified only by a number and classified as a specimen. Precautions were taken to ensure he could never escape, sealing his fate before he was old enough to understand what freedom truly meant. Laboratory grows quiet except for the steady rhythm of equipment as the researchers gather around the restrained boy. Their focus sharpens, attention fixed on the data streaming across the monitors. Whatever they have done has not failed, but it has not produced the reaction they expected either. One of them reaches a conclusion after reviewing the results. The subject has clearly developed abnormal abilities, yet his body remains human in shape, and his mind shows no signs of collapse. This contradiction only deepens their interest rather than easing their concern. The boy sits bound to the chair, chains and sensors holding him in place. His posture is tense, but his eyes remain steady, betraying awareness and control. Despite everything forced into his body, he endures without screaming or thrashing. Decision is made without hesitation. If the current methods have not revealed his limits, then they will escalate. Every viable component, every experimental material, will be implanted until something finally breaks or responds. The researchers turn back to their instruments, syringes, and tools, clicking into readiness. The room fills again with purposeful movement as they prepare to continue, determined to extract an answer from number 17 no matter the cost. A new point in time is marked decades later. The space trembles as power stirs, and the air itself seems unsettled. The boy, now older, stands at the center of the disturbance, while those behind him struggle to keep their footing, coughing and bracing themselves as cracks spread across the ground. Facing him is a massive monster with a segmented, horned body, its presence oppressive and violent. The creature surges forward with killing intent, its roar tearing through the space as it commits fully to the attack. The boy raises his hand, and a concentrated burst of energy erupts outward. The force is overwhelming, tearing through the monster in an instant and flooding the area with blinding light, leaving no room for resistance. Aftermath follows immediately. The ground splits apart, debris flying as the destructive power gouges a deep scar through the surroundings. Smoke, heat, and residual energy linger where the strike passed. As the dust settles, the devastation remains etched into the terrain. The attack has ended decisively, leaving behind shattered stone and scorched earth as proof of the immense strength he now commands. A woman rushes forward clutching a small child, her face still pale with shock. Gratitude spills out of her as she holds the child tightly, relief overwhelming the fear that had moments ago threatened to consume them both. Nearby, an injured adult approaches more slowly, one arm held close to his body. His voice carries regret rather than blame, apologizing that someone so young was forced to shoulder such a brutal responsibility in the midst of chaos and death. The boy walks past them through shattered stone and blood-stained ground, his steps measured and calm. He answers without emotion, accepting the situation as it is, as if hardship has long since stopped being something worth questioning. Time advances again. He comes to a halt, boots planted amid the wreckage of fallen monsters and broken structures. A sudden pause grips him, and an unfamiliar sensation surfaces, cutting through the numb routine of survival. He looks around at the devastation, confusion rising where certainty once lived. Questions echo within him, why he is here, what he was doing, and why everything feels disconnected. From behind, a familiar authority calls out to him, addressing him by his assigned number and questioning the lapse, suggesting that something within his memory has begun to fracture. A man in a white coat spreads his arms and laughs in triumph as realization hits, celebrating what he believes are long-delayed side effects finally appearing. He treats it as a long-awaited success, not a warning. The words reach number 17 slowly. Standing amid the ruined street, he repeats them in his mind with uncertainty. The idea of side effects feels distant and unreal, as if it belongs to someone else, not him. Time shifts again, marking years of continued experimentation. Gloved hands move across a clipboard as detailed notes are scratched down. The records summarize a horrifying span of work, hundreds of monster cell transplants carried out relentlessly over more than a decade. The result of those years is revealed. Number 17 is restrained in a heavy chair, chains biting into his body as monstrous traits strain against his human form. He roars in pain and resistance while observers declare him an unprecedented success, praising him as their finest creation. Another memory surfaces from later years. A handler addresses him with practiced familiarity, rewarding obedience as a slab of raw meat is handed over. In the same breath, a new task unfolds nearby. Number 17 lunges forward instinctively as a monster rushes a startled civilian, his conditioned response overriding hesitation as violence erupts once more. In the aftermath, a massive monster squats in the rubble, casually chewing on chunks of stone and metal scooped from the ground, as if destruction were merely feeding. A nearby hunter reacts with smug confidence, treating the sight as confirmation rather than a threat. Civilians keep their distance, some turning away and shielding children, others watching in tense silence, while the monster continues to grind debris between its jaws, erasing the line between what lives and what is consumed. The memory fractures again. A monstrous figure rears up, its form looming and grotesque, while a thought surfaces that all assigned missions have already reached their conclusion. The weight of endless orders and repetitive violence presses down, leaving nothing but emptiness where purpose once stood. The world splits open. The ground tears apart with overwhelming force, carving a deep chasm through a barren landscape. The shock ripples outward, reshaping the land as if it were fragile clay, marking the sheer scale of power that has been unleashed and normalized. Silence follows. In the dust and fading light, a single bone lies half buried in the sand, stirred gently by the wind. It remains as a quiet remnant of what was destroyed, a mute witness to the countless lives and creatures reduced to fragments over time. A fragment of bone strikes the ground and bounces once before settling, its impact sharp and final. The sound echoes against the emptiness, marking the end of something that once had form and strength. A sudden burst of blinding light erupts from the earth, a pillar of force tearing upward as the ground collapses inward. Dust and debris are flung aside, swallowed by the overwhelming surge as the land itself gives way. Within the darkness that follows, a skeletal structure twists and buckles. Bones split and fracture under unbearable pressure, lightning-like energy crawling across them as the transformation continues without pause or mercy. After hundreds of monster cell transplants, the subject's identity is no longer human. The designation is finalized, reducing a life to a title and a number. Muscle fibers coil and expand, wrapping around the altered frame as blood seeps and steams in the air. The body completes its change, no longer belonging to the boy who once existed, but to Chimera Hunter Number 17, forged through suffering and reshaped into a living weapon. A violent surge erupts outward, light and heat exploding from a single point. The force consumes everything nearby, erasing shape and sound in an instant as something long restrained finally breaks free. The brilliance fades, bare feet touch the cracked ground. Dust coils around steady legs, no longer warped or monstrous, but unmistakably human in form. The earth beneath them settles as the transformation stabilizes. He stands revealed amid drifting clouds of debris, his body whole and unchained. Muscles flex instinctively as he looks down at his own hands, confusion written across his face. The question forms in his mind before certainty can return, whether this body truly belongs to him again. The land stretches out beneath a widening sky, sunlight pouring through a broken stone arch in the distance. A declaration follows, absolute and final, confirming what has occurred. The one who had been reduced to a numbered weapon has been restored, his existence reclaimed as life itself is revived. He studies his own condition with cautious honesty. Although his body looks human again, he recognizes that the transformation is not complete. The monster abilities remain within him, active and responsive, confirming that whatever brought him back did not fully erase what he had become. As he reflects on the passing days, a realization settles in. No one from the laboratory has come to retrieve him. There have been no pursuit teams, no restraints, no signs of surveillance. From this absence alone, he concludes that his status has changed entirely. He has been discarded. He lifts his arm and examines his wrist, where the identifying mark once branded him as a specimen. The number is gone. There is no trace of ownership left on his skin. The disappearance of that mark confirms what he already suspects. The laboratory no longer claims him. With that thought comes a deeper question. If the lab has truly severed all ties, then the life that once defined him may finally be over. He wonders whether this means he is no longer bound to their experiments, their commands, or their control. His thoughts turn inward as fragments of memory surface. His revival was not random. It was made possible by the immortal-type monster cells fused into his body, cells known for restoring life as long as their core remains intact. Yet even with that knowledge, unease lingers. He has never heard of a human surviving such a fusion, let alone returning in a stable state. Now standing in his restored body, he studies himself and feels the difference immediately. His strength has returned, his physique restored to its peak, and his senses feel sharp and clear. The lingering haze that once clouded his thoughts is gone, as if the experiment's side effects were stripped away entirely. For the first time, his mind feels truly his own. As he turns away, another truth settles in. The spells and restraints placed on him, measures meant to stop him if he ever escaped, have vanished as well. Whatever he has become now is no longer bound by the chains of his past. A memory surfaces of the time when he was no longer called by a name, only by a number. Bound in chains and reduced to a tool, he recalls the end of that life and the faint hope that followed it. If the existence of number 17 has truly ended, then the possibility of living as a human finally opens before him. His thoughts shift toward identity. The number was never his to begin with, it was something imposed on him by the laboratory. As he lets that designation go, he begins to search for a name that belongs solely to himself, something that reflects a life beyond experiments and violence. Fragments of an old conversation resurface in his mind. Someone once described him as volatile and aggressive, insisting that if he wanted to be human, he would need to make a conscious effort to help others rather than simply survive. That judgment lingers, uncomfortable yet difficult to dismiss. He considers the weight of those words, helping people not in small, fleeting ways, but on a scale large enough to matter. The idea feels distant and unrealistic, especially given his origins and the life he was forced to endure, yet it plants a stubborn seed of possibility. As he looks out over the landscape, the question of his future finally takes shape. With the past behind him and no chains left to bind him, he stands at a crossroads. Revenge briefly crosses his mind, but it remains only one of many paths, not yet chosen, as the uncertainty of what comes next settles in. He weighs the idea of revenge and quietly dismisses it. For that path to matter, the ones responsible would need to be within reach, and to him they feel impossibly distant, as if they belong to a different lifetime altogether. Standing beneath the fading sky, he exhales and lets the thought pass. There is no clear way back to the human world yet, no door waiting to be opened. The reality of his situation anchors him to the present rather than the past. He looks down at his own feet resting on the ground and accepts that, sooner or later, his path will cross with others. Whatever answers exist will come in time, so he chooses to set the question aside for now. Turning his body toward the light, he surveys the land ahead. The silence stretches, broken only by the wind, as he reaches a quiet conclusion. He no longer needs to hesitate. With resolve settling in his chest, he makes his decision. His first priority is clear and unwavering. He will live as a human being should, starting from this moment forward. He turns his body away from the open plain, the decision settling quietly in his chest. With the sun at his back, he shifts his attention from distant thoughts to what lies immediately around him, grounding himself in the present. As he moves forward, his bare steps carry him into denser terrain. Leaves brush against his skin, and branches bend aside as he pushes through the greenery, alert but unhurried. The forest opens just enough for light to spill through the canopy. He pauses instinctively, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings, his posture relaxed yet ready, shaped by long habit rather than fear. A subtle sound breaks the quiet. His expression tightens, eyes sharpening as his focus snaps toward the source, curiosity overtaking his calm. He stills completely, listening. The realization that something nearby has noticed him settles in, marking the first interruption to his solitary resolve. He pushes through the last of the brush and stops short when a large creature comes into view, lying motionless on the ground. The scene immediately strikes him as strange. Not the aftermath of a clean hunt, but something more abrupt and unnatural. As he looks closer, he notes the creature's condition. Its body shows no signs of a prolonged struggle or severe wounds that would explain its death through brute force alone. The conclusion forms quickly in his mind. Whatever killed it did not overpower it directly. Poison is the most likely cause, something subtle enough to bring down a powerful beast without leaving obvious damage. Rather than recoil, he feels a flicker of satisfaction. The corpse represents an unexpected opportunity, exactly what he needs to move forward with his plans. He raises his arm, and a sharp, blade-like form manifests in his grasp. The tool finally at hand, he prepares to begin working, ready to turn the fallen creature into the materials he needs. He pauses and mentally reviews what he remembers from his time in the laboratory. The knowledge surfaces clearly, organized and precise, guiding his hands before he even moves. Following that ingrained procedure, he presses his palm against the creature's body and makes the first careful cut. The blade slides in smoothly, opening a clean line along the stomach just as he recalls. The moment the incision is made, something reacts violently. A dark, noxious substance erupts outward, spreading unnaturally fast and carrying a sharp, oppressive presence that confirms his suspicion. He retreats only a fraction, unharmed, watching as the poisonous residue disperses into the air and stains the surrounding ground. The realization settles fully that the beast's death was caused by toxins rather than injury. Ignoring the stench and the lingering haze, he continues working, slicing through the hide with steady motions. Though the material is foul, it remains intact, and he decides it will need to be thoroughly washed before it can serve its purpose. He rinses the hide in the river, watching dark residue seep out and vanish into the flowing water. When he lifts it again, he feels a brief sense of satisfaction, judging the result acceptable for a first attempt. As his hands move over the soaked material, something feels off. What looked pliable at first resists his grip, its surface refusing to bend the way ordinary leather should. He tugs harder, testing it from different angles, but the hide barely yields. The texture reminds him less of fabric and more of metal, dense and uncooperative despite its appearance. A spark of realization crosses his face. In situations like this, brute force has always been the simplest answer, and old habits surface without hesitation. He slams his fist down into the hide with overwhelming strength. The ground erupts beneath the impact, shockwaves tearing through the material as it finally gives way, scattering debris outward in a violent burst. He hesitates mid-motion, pausing to reconsider his approach. The thought of tanning the hide surfaces, along with uncertainty about whether he is handling the process correctly. Rather than overthink it, he commits to testing the method directly. He brings his strength down decisively, trusting experience over caution to see what result it produces. The impact lands hard, and the hide responds immediately. Its surface changes, losing resistance as the material yields in a way it had not before. He lifts the hide and feels the difference at once. What was once rigid and uncooperative is now pliable, smooth, and surprisingly soft in his hands. Satisfied, he judges the size and condition to be suitable for use. With a small flame igniting nearby, he moves on to the next step, ready to finish preparing the hide properly. As he adjusts the rough garment around his torso, a sudden jolt of unease cuts through his focus. The moment is brief, but sharp enough to make him pause mid-motion, his attention pulled away from his work. He tightens his grip and tests the fit again, feeling how the material pulls and settles against his body. Despite the crude process, the hide holds together well, and the result feels unexpectedly comfortable. Standing upright, he looks himself over, noting how naturally the piece conforms to his shape. There is a quiet satisfaction in realizing that it fits almost perfectly, as if it were made specifically for him. That satisfaction fades when he senses something off. He reaches up and pinches the fabric near his shoulder, his fingers pressing into a damp, tacky patch that doesn't belong. A faint stain of dark residue seeps into view as he pulls the material back. He recognizes it immediately as lingering poison that wasn't fully removed. The discovery leaves him thoughtful and cautious, aware that the hide still carries a trace of danger despite all his effort. He accepts the inconvenience, choosing to deal with the remaining poison later rather than lose more time. As he stands in the clearing, a harsh, uneven sound rises from the ground, like labored breathing. He turns toward it and realizes the creature he thought dead is still alive. Its body shudders weakly, flames flickering as it coughs and convulses, stubbornly resisting the stillness that should have claimed it. Watching more closely, he feels a flicker of curiosity rather than alarm. The signs of rigor mortis he noticed earlier make the situation impossible by ordinary standards, leading him to suspect that the creature possesses an unusual constitution tied to immortality or regeneration. For a brief moment, his instincts as a former hunter surface, recalling how he once would have eliminated such a being without hesitation. Impulse fades as he measures the creature's feeble state and recognizes that it lacks the strength to pose any real danger. A faint smile crosses his face as he decides to let it live. Seeing their survival as a shared stroke of luck, he resolves to move forward peacefully, determined to make the most of this second chance at life, rather than returning to needless violence. He turns away from the clearing and begins to walk, leaving the weakened creature behind. With each step, his thoughts settle on the uncertainty of the future, trusting that fate will decide whether their paths ever cross again. Bare feet carry him into a darker stretch of terrain, the ground hard and uneven beneath him. The steady rhythm of his steps echoes in the enclosed space as he moves forward without hesitation. Now clothed and no longer preoccupied with survival, he surveys his surroundings. The realization comes quietly that shelter must be his next priority if he intends to live peacefully in this unfamiliar place. The thought is abruptly shattered when the earth itself seems to cry out. Stone fractures violently, the sound of breaking rock tearing through the silence as something massive forces its way upward from below. From the collapsing ground rises an enormous centipede-like monster, its body towering over him with countless legs and curved blades gleaming along its sides. He stands calmly before it, hands clasped behind his back, unfazed by its roar as the true danger of this world finally reveals itself. The ground trembles as the massive creature shifts its weight, surrounding him with towering limbs and curved claws. He stands still at the center, looking upward with a calm but focused expression, gauging the threat pressing in from all sides. Darkness closes around him as the creature's presence blocks out what little light there is. He narrows his eyes, tension settling into his posture, recognizing that visibility is poor and that reacting too late would be fatal. A sudden attack breaks the stillness. A stream of corrosive fluid slices through the air toward him, fast and lethal, carrying the monster's killing intent in a single, decisive strike. He reacts instantly, swinging his arm with precise timing. The attack is cut apart mid-motion, green fluid spraying away as the force of his movement overwhelms the creature's assault. The remains of the attack hit the ground with a heavy splash as the monster recoils. Without hesitation or lingering emotion, he advances forward through the darkness, already prepared to face whatever comes next. A vast, snow-covered landscape stretches into the distance. Thick flakes fall steadily from a gray sky, muffling the world and reducing it to cold silence. Jagged rocks and evergreen trees stand half-buried under layers of white, giving the place a harsh, unforgiving feel. A blizzard howls across a white, frozen landscape. A massive white-furred beast rears up, its mouth wide as it bellows into the storm. The cold is overwhelming, and survival here would demand constant effort. The man moves steadily through the snow, passing between fallen, frozen bodies of similar beasts. His steps remain unhurried despite the harsh terrain, and he acknowledges that finding food in a place like this would be difficult. The environment shifts to a dense, humid forest. Strange fungi cling to a tree trunk, releasing wisps of spores into the air. The smell is heavy and unpleasant, prompting immediate rejection. Turns away from a cave entrance slick with moisture and green residue dripping from the ceiling. Small creatures cling to the rock walls, and the dampness alone makes the place unsuitable for living. A volcanic region comes into view, with molten lava spilling down jagged rock faces. Heat radiates from the ground itself, making it clear that staying here would be just as impossible as the other locations. He comes to a stop atop a rocky outcrop, staring up at the wide, open sky. The sudden brightness and open space leave him momentarily stunned, his posture rigid as he takes in the unfamiliar freedom around him. He slowly shifts his gaze downward, noticing the sheer drop below the cliff. A quiet sense of awe settles in as he acknowledges the vastness of the landscape stretching out beneath his feet. Looking across the terrain, he reflects on how unexpected it feels to admire scenery in a place meant to be hostile. The realization lingers that even the demon realm can hold moments of calm and beauty. Deciding not to linger, he bends his knees and leaps off the cliff. His body cuts cleanly through the air, dropping toward the river below without hesitation. He lands near the water's edge and peers into the clear current. Fish glide beneath the surface, plentiful and easy to spot, and he notes this quietly as a promising sign for survival. At first glance, they seem plentiful and harmless. Then the water erupts. Several fish surge upward in sudden bursts, snapping their jaws as they twist through the current. Their teeth flash, sharp and predatory, turning the calm stream into something far more dangerous. Watching them thrash and bite, he judges their size and behavior with quiet interest. They look edible and useful. If he takes his time fishing them out and cooks them properly, it might feel less like survival and more like camping. He pauses, hand to his chin, letting out a small, thoughtful hum. With food readily available, the place already feels livable. In his mind, a simple life takes shape, shelter, warmth, and a steady routine. The idea of building a house nearby no longer feels unrealistic but practical. Takes a few steps forward and notices flowers growing nearby. They are bright and healthy, untouched by decay or danger. Their presence suggests balance, a land that can support more than just survival. As he walks on, he draws in a slow breath. The air is clean and light, free of the stench of battle or experimentation. Each breath comes easily, reinforcing the sense that this place is safe. He stops beneath the canopy of trees and looks up. Sunlight filters through the leaves as they sway gently, filling the forest with a soft, calming rustle. The world feels alive, but not hostile. Standing quietly among the trees, he lets the moment settle. With the flowers at his feet and the forest around him, he comes to a simple conclusion. This place will do. He tilts his head upward, a faint smile forming as light filters across his face. Leaves drift lazily past, and with quiet certainty, the thought settles in. This place will be his home. A breeze sweeps across the open land, carrying dust and loose leaves with it. The wide sky stretches overhead, calm and endless, as if the world itself is breathing around him. The air suddenly changes. Thin arcs of blue energy crackle across the ground, buzzing sharply as they carve unstable lines through the earth. The calm begins to fracture. The energy collapses inward, tearing open a swirling void. The air distorts violently as the rift expands, its core churning with unnatural force that overwhelms the peaceful landscape. The portal spits something out at tremendous speed. The object slams into the ground and skids across the dirt, sending debris flying as the shockwave ripples outward. Smoke and embers rise as the figure pushes itself upright. Red light ignites behind a dark visor, glowing with hostile awareness. Heat and sparks leak from its body, turning the air heavy and oppressive. The machine straightens fully, its presence radiating danger. As it surveys its surroundings, a realization forms within it. This unfamiliar land is not a battlefield it recognizes. It voices the question plainly: this place must be the demon realm. With a small sense of resolve, he decides to begin anew here. He acknowledges this place as where he will settle down and live. Turning his thoughts to the work ahead, he prepares to start by clearing the ground, focusing his power as energy gathers around his hand in preparation for the first task. He releases the gathered power in a wide, sweeping motion. The force tears through the clearing, carving a massive arc across the land as vegetation and obstacles are erased in its path, leaving the ground abruptly bare. The energy strikes the trees directly. Thick trunks are severed cleanly, their upper portions collapsing as the bases are left behind like stumps driven into the soil. The clearing begins to open fully, stripped of its former density. Moments later, the aftermath settles. Logs and stumps lie scattered across the grass, the forest edge pushed back. He surveys the result and decides the work is sufficient, satisfied that the space has been cleared enough for now. He lifts the usable logs with controlled precision, guiding them through the air and setting them aside. Each piece is gathered carefully, separated from debris, forming an orderly pile meant for future use. Standing among the stumps and stacked wood, he pauses to reassess the area. Though the clearing is usable, he notes that the surface is still uneven, recognizing that more preparation will be needed before he can truly begin building. He works carefully, easing his strength as he brings power down into the ground. Each controlled strike sends force through the soil, breaking and settling it without tearing the land apart, as he steadily evens the surface. When the dust clears, the clearing has changed. The ground stretches out flat and open, framed by distant hills and trees, with sunlight falling unobstructed across the space. He looks over the result and feels satisfied that the location will receive ample light. He moves without a strict plan, guided instead by instinct and physical memory. His hands test the materials, his feet trace the space, and he allows his body to decide where each step should go. Lifting a heavy log with ease, he carries it into position. The weight does not slow him as he begins laying the foundation, aligning the timber where it feels right. One by one, he drives the logs into the earth to form pillars at the corners of the site. As each post sinks firmly into the ground, he reflects on the simple enjoyment of the work, realizing that the act of building something of his own brings him a quiet, unfamiliar happiness. He kneels and begins laying wooden planks across the prepared foundation. His movements are steady and repetitive, placing each board flush against the next until the floor starts to take shape beneath his hands. Instead of metal fasteners, he produces a thick, green mucus taken from a snail-type monster. The substance pools in his palm, viscous and alive with slow bubbles, ready to be used as a binding agent. He spreads the mucus along the edges of the wood and presses the planks together. As it settles, the substance clings tightly, gradually firming up, its texture changing as it begins to harden and seal the joints. With the floor secured, he moves on to the next step. Streams of power arc outward and brush through the surrounding trees, bending branches and leaves as he prepares additional materials, shaping the space around the structure. When he finally pauses, he looks up with quiet confidence. Holding a small bundle of greenery at his side, he concludes that the area is now safe, satisfied that no monster will dare approach the house he is building. The completed structure stands quietly in the clearing, bound together with layers of hardened monster mucus and wrapped in silkworm cocoon thread. He looks it over from a short distance and feels content with the result, finding the small log house warmer and more comfortable than he expected. That satisfaction fades into mild unease. As he studies the house, a vague sense of incompleteness settles in, as though something essential has been overlooked despite everything being properly built. He searches his memory for an answer, recalling lessons from long ago. Images surface of ordinary homes from before the gates opened, places where people lived normal lives. Those memories become clearer: a quiet front yard, sunlight on trimmed grass, and a pet running freely near the house. A simple sign of everyday life that once felt natural. Clearing in front of his new home remains empty. He accepts that such a detail cannot be recreated here, realizing that bringing something like a dog from the human world into the demon realm is not an option, no matter how much he might wish otherwise. He crouches in the grass in front of the house and presses his hand to the ground, thinking through what might complete the space. The idea of adding something living occurs to him, and he wonders whether creating a small garden would make the place feel more settled. As he considers what could grow in this world, uncertainty gives way to a sudden realization. His expression shifts as a specific location comes to mind. He looks toward the distant peaks and remembers that Snow Mountain lies nearby. With that thought, he settles on a decision, choosing mandragoras as the plants he will cultivate. The environment changes as he heads toward the mountain. Snow and cold air surround him, the landscape growing harsher with every step as white drifts stretch across the ground. He continues forward through the deep snow, taking in the sight of towering peaks and dense demon energy lingering in the air. Despite the biting cold and heavy snowfall, he is struck by how fitting the place feels for the mandragoras that thrive atop the mountain. As the snow falls around him, the storm stirs old memories. He recalls a day much like this one, when a blizzard raged as he was taken from his life and brought to the laboratory, the cold so severe that escape felt impossible. The memory sharpens. Lying in the snow back then, numb and shaking, he remembers feeling a grim relief when they finally took him inside, grateful simply to be pulled away from the freezing ground. Walking forward now, his bare feet crunch softly through the snow. He reflects that becoming a chimera was not entirely a curse, at least not in moments like this, when hunger and cold no longer threaten his survival. The snowfall gradually weakens as he moves deeper into the mountains. The air remains heavy with demon energy, and he senses that the conditions are right, that what he is looking for should be close by. He stops when movement catches his attention. Partially buried beneath the snow, broad green leaves push through the white surface. The mandragoras rustle faintly, and he recognizes them at once, relieved that his journey has not been in vain. He recalls what he knows about mandragoras as he surveys the small cluster. They are delicate creatures that become distressed easily, so much so that even a slight change in their surroundings can cause them to wither and die. Deciding to move them carefully, he crouches down in the snow. He reasons that younger mandragoras will adapt more easily to a new environment, making them the safest choice to take with him. He reaches into the snow and grips one of the small plants, pulling it free from the frozen ground. As he does, he remembers too late that mandragoras are known to react loudly when disturbed. Instead of screaming, the uprooted mandragora wriggles weakly in his hands. Its round body shifts slightly, leaves bobbing as it looks more confused than distressed, which catches him off guard. Before he can fully process this reaction, he senses movement again. Another mandragora suddenly pops up nearby, drawing his attention as he realizes this one is behaving differently as well. As he lifts another mandragora, he notices that this one reacts the same way. Instead of panicking, it shifts softly in his grip, making small, sleepy sounds. The repeated calm response makes him pause, unsettled by how different this is from what he expects. He gathers more of the small mandragoras in his hands. Cradled together, they emit faint murmurs, their bodies warm and pliant, behaving less like distressed monsters and more like drowsy creatures half asleep. He recalls what he learned about mandragoras in the past. Their infamous screams are not natural but a result of artificial cultivation in the human world, where a lack of demon energy keeps them under constant strain, causing them to lash out when forcefully uprooted. Here, in the demon realm, even as he handles them, they do not resist or attempt to escape. He gently rubs one of them, puzzled by the absence of fear or aggression, and wonders why they are not fighting back at all. Realization slowly settles in. Holding the mandragoras close, he considers that they may sense something familiar in him. After all, mandragora cells were implanted within his body, and he begins to suspect that, to them, he may feel like one of their own. Seeing how calmly the mandragoras cling to him, he concludes that this situation is actually favorable. If they remain this relaxed, moving them and raising them later will be far easier than expected. His thoughts drift to the future as he imagines letting them grow naturally. Once they mature, he considers asking them for spare roots to dry and brew into tea, while planning to eat their berries as simple snacks. That thought is followed by an important reminder. Mandragora berries become poisonous if taken against their will, so he resolves that persuasion will be necessary rather than force. A sudden scream echoes across the snowy mountains, sharp and full of panic. He stiffens at the sound and immediately recognizes it as a human cry, realizing that hunters must be somewhere nearby despite the danger of the area. Turning his head toward the source of the noise, he allows a faint smile to form. He decides to take advantage of the situation, choosing to investigate further and use the opportunity to obtain gate stones, while others are already active in the area. On the far side of the snow-covered mountain, the hunters press on through the drifts, frustration and panic bearing down on them. One of them realizes too late that they were abandoned and used as bait. The anger is sharp but pointless as the danger closes in. Sudden rush of movement breaks through the trees. Large beasts leap down toward them, their bodies cutting through the falling snow as they descend with lethal intent. The hunters barely manage to react. One braces himself while the other raises his weapon, both struggling to hold their ground as the monsters crash into the clearing. A translucent barrier flares into existence just in time, absorbing the impact of a lunging beast. The force ripples through the shield, shaking the hunter who maintains it as claws and fangs slam against the surface. Sweat beads on his face as he strains to keep the defense intact. The realization sets in that their resistance will not last long, and that continuing to fight like this will only delay the inevitable. The barrier strains under relentless pressure as multiple beasts slam into it at once. Cracks race across the glowing surface, spreading outward as the hunter braces himself, feeling the defense falter with every impact. Desperation floods his thoughts. Regret surfaces as he wonders why he ever stepped beyond simple grunt work, cursing the decision that led him into a hunt far beyond his abilities. Barrier finally gives way. With a sharp, shattering burst, the shield explodes into fragments of light, scattering through the air as the hunter cries out and throws his arms up too late to protect himself. A blinding column of force crashes down into the snow, detonating with tremendous power. The ground erupts, snow and debris blasting outward as the surrounding monsters recoil from the shock. When the smoke and snow settle, the beasts hesitate, growling as they circle the impact site. The two hunters stare in stunned confusion at the sudden intrusion, struggling to understand what has just appeared before them. Within the swirling snow and settling dust, a human figure walks forward at an unhurried pace. The hunters stare in disbelief, struggling to process the fact that someone has entered the battlefield so calmly. The man comes to a stop as the snow drifts past him. His expression is blank and unreadable, eyes steady, as if the chaos around him barely registers. One of the beasts lowers its body and snarls, muscles tensing as it prepares to lunge. The creature reacts instinctively, sensing an unfamiliar presence that does not fit into its understanding of prey. Darkness and pressure surge outward from the man in a sudden wave. The air itself seems to recoil, and the monsters flinch, their movements faltering as an overwhelming presence bears down on them. Before the beasts can react, he moves. In a single fluid motion, he closes the distance and strikes, sending one snow rabbit crashing into the ground with brutal force. The remaining creatures recoil in shock, finally realizing that the figure before them is far more dangerous than anything they have faced. The two hunters finally catch their breath as disbelief sets in. One grips his injured arm while staring at the man before them, stunned by the realization that even B-class monsters fled the moment he appeared. As the tension eases, gratitude replaces panic. A quiet thanks is offered while melting snow drips from nearby branches. The danger that moments ago felt unavoidable now abruptly gone. They introduce themselves in haste, naming Songju-oh and Tae-hun Kim. Their posture remains cautious, and their eyes never fully leave the man standing barefoot in the snow. He responds simply, giving his name as Do-un Cheon. The name draws a brief exchange of looks between the hunters, neither of whom recognizes it, and curiosity flickers across their faces as they take in his strange attire. One of them finally voices concern about why he is here, pointing out that Snow Mountain is far too dangerous for hunters of their level. Pressed for an answer in return, the truth comes out plainly. They came despite the risk because they needed the money. Hearing that the job involves capturing a chimera alive makes him pause. The word stirs a flicker of interest, followed immediately by caution, and his expression tightens as he weighs the implications. As the explanation continues, he learns that the target is a machine-type organism that escaped from a laboratory and fled through the gate. The tension eases from his shoulders when he understands it is not the kind of chimera connected to him. That clarification, his thoughts settle. Since the target is unrelated, he decides there is no reason to involve himself further and resolves to simply take a gate stone and leave the area. When asked about his belongings and gate stones, he moves ahead without hesitation. The hunters trail behind as the truth comes out. Their former teammates took everything and abandoned them during the chaos. The bitterness resurfaces as one of the injured hunters clenches his arm, realizing the betrayal was planned from the beginning. Putting the pieces together, the man calmly concludes that the ones who fled must now be carrying the gate stone. One of the hunters hesitates, voice shaking as he asks whether Do-un plans to return to the human world anytime soon. Both men look unsteady on their feet, exhaustion and injury catching up to them as the lingering demon energy presses down. A clear explanation follows in his thoughts. How long a hunter can survive in the demon realm depends entirely on their rank, and those who fail to return in time without cleansing the corruption are doomed to die. This rule, however, does not apply to him. The hunter's fear boils over into desperation. They plead to be taken back, revealing the weight they carry beyond the battlefield, including a family waiting on the other side of the gate. At that moment, Do-un senses something familiar. His focus sharpens, a pulse running through him as recognition settles in. The presence he has been tracking is finally close. Without another word, he launches himself upward, leaving a shock in the snow where he stood. The two hunters stare skyward in disbelief, calling after him as his figure rapidly disappears into the sky, unsure of where or why he is going. Cold wind sweeps across the snowy ridge as the small mechanical figure stands alone at the edge. Its glowing eyes scan the vast, writhing mass below, an entire valley packed with hostile creatures, their shapes overlapping like a living tide. The scale of danger is immediately clear. From the ridge, the machine assesses the terrain and the threat. The demon horde surges and shifts, dark bodies crawling over one another, while faint arcs of energy ripple through the air. This is not a place meant for ordinary hunters to survive. The stillness breaks as figures burst into motion from behind. A coordinated assault begins. Hunters launch themselves forward, weapons raised, magic and steel converging at once. Their expressions are tense and resolute, driven by urgency rather than confidence. Machine reacts instantly. Red energy flares across its body, systems activating in a sharp, violent surge. A lethal countermeasure is triggered, precise and merciless, cutting through the incoming threat without hesitation. The hunters launch their attack at once. One dives from above with a shield raised, another swings a glowing blade head-on, while a third charges through the air wrapped in magic. Steel, spells, and force converge in a coordinated strike as they move to overwhelm the mechanical enemy in a single decisive assault. Do-un stands alone in the falling snow, lifting his head as he senses something is off. His expression tightens with mild concern as the thought crosses his mind that he may have arrived too late. He walks forward across the white ground and immediately notices signs of chaos. Blood stains the snow in streaks and splashes, and abandoned packs lie scattered as if dropped in haste. A small floating device hums nearby, reinforcing the sense that whatever happened here ended abruptly. From the state of the area, he concludes that the hunters fled in a hurry. The abandoned gear and trampled snow show the hunters fled in fear, not order. Studying the tracks, Do-un notices irregular marks mixed with smaller footprints, signs not of one creature, but of both a beast and a child. Information about the target becomes clear. The escaped entity is described as a test specimen that broke free from a laboratory, a machine-type organism that crossed the gate while fleeing. It is capable of freely changing its form because its body is made of liquid metal, but its size is limited due to scarce materials, roughly no larger than a child or a large dog. Do-un reflects on the information he has pieced together about the target. The idea of a machine-type organism catches his interest, and a faint, amused smile forms as he considers how unusual such a creature must be. He quietly judges its strength, finding it impressive that something of that size managed to overpower 5 B-class hunters. Rather than concern, The thought brings a sense of mild approval. Elsewhere in the forest, two hunters struggle onward through the snow. One of them, Songju, is barely able to stand. His body trembles violently as demon energy spreads through him, and he admits that the contamination has progressed too far for him to survive much longer. The other hunter supports him desperately, refusing to accept what he is hearing. He reminds Songju of the life waiting for him beyond the gate, of the child who is supposed to be born soon, and begs him not to give up. Songju's strength finally falters. Blood spills from his mouth as he coughs violently, his body buckling in the snow. At that moment, a heavy presence presses down nearby, and the surviving hunter looks up in shock, sensing that something, or someone, has just arrived. A sudden glow cuts through the snowy forest as Do-un steps forward, carrying a large pack stacked high with supplies. His arrival is almost unreal, his figure framed by warm light against the cold surroundings. One of the hunters calls out his name in shock, while Do-un remains silent, taking in the situation without reacting. The hunter's attention snaps fully to him, realizing that this man now stands between them and death. Overcome with desperation, the remaining hunter drops to his knees in the snow. He bows low, voice breaking as he begs for help, pleading for their lives with nothing left to hold on to but hope. Do-un tilts his head slightly, processing the request. He recalls hearing that they no longer had a gate stone, and his calm expression reflects neither urgency nor pity. As the hunter continues begging, Do-un listens without interrupting. In a frantic motion, the kneeling hunter reaches into his gear and produces 2 checks, thrusting them forward with shaking hands. He offers everything he has left, explaining that this money was brought at the risk of their lives, and begs Do-un to sell them a gate stone so they can escape the demon realm alive. The hunter's desperation spills over as he insists that they will die if they do not return immediately. His hands shake uncontrollably as he holds out the checks, fear etched into every movement while Do-un watches in silence. Do-un's gaze drops to the money. He quietly weighs its value, acknowledging that it is a large sum, yet also recognizing that money itself holds little meaning to him in this place. After a brief pause, he considers that it may still be useful once he returns to the human world. Reaches into his belongings and takes out 2 gate stones. Without ceremony, he cracks them open, releasing a surge of blue energy that spills outward and begins to twist the air in front of him. The energy rapidly expands, forming a swirling gate that hums with power. As the portal stabilizes, the hunter bows deeply, gratitude overwhelming him as he clutches Do-un's hand and thanks him repeatedly before turning back toward his injured companion. Supporting Songju with renewed urgency, the hunter starts toward the gate. Do-un glances once more at the checks in his hand, then lifts his eyes as he casually asks how much a gate stone costs in the human world, leaving the hunter staring at him in stunned disbelief as he answers. As the injured hunter reaches out weakly, Do-un stops him with a calm gesture. He explains that the amount they offered is more than necessary, and his tone carries no urgency, only a quiet certainty. Do-un extends his hand again, this time returning part of the money. A faint smile appears as he offers it back, treating the excess as change rather than profit. Blue mana surges outward from Do-un in a sudden rush. The energy swells and rolls across the clearing, wrapping around Songju's body as it pours into him without restraint. The remaining hunter recoils in shock as the flow intensifies. He realizes what is happening and panics, understanding that directly injecting mana like this is something even A-class hunters avoid because of the risk of fatal backlash if the energies collide. Within the torrent of mana, a grim image forms in his mind. If this continues unchecked, the clashing energies could tear both bodies apart, and at this rate, Do-un and Songju are headed toward a catastrophic end. The violent surge of mana abruptly collapses into a warm flash of light. Songju stiffens in place, eyes wide as he looks down at his own hands, stunned by the sudden change coursing through his body. Clarity returns to his face as the corruption vanishes. He realizes that the demon energy poisoning him has been completely purified, leaving only clean mana behind. Shock gives way to disbelief as he understands he is no longer dying. Songju lunges forward and grabs his companion, shouting in relief as he clings to him. The other hunter freezes for a moment, then stares back in stunned silence, struggling to process what he is seeing. The hunters bow deeply in the snow, thanking Do-un for his help and promising they won't forget his kindness. He cuts them off calmly, telling them to leave and go back. Do-un walks on alone, expression neutral. As he moves, the realization lingers. Purifying demon energy with mana should be impossible without an overwhelming reserve. The question of what he truly is hangs unspoken. He arrives back at his cabin. Dark energy stirs faintly around it, but the structure remains untouched. Seeing it intact, he feels a quiet sense of relief. No one trespassed while he was gone. Standing before his home, he reflects briefly. The outing went better than expected, and he even came back with some money. With that simple thought, he settles back into his routine. Do-un pauses as he notices movement from the small creatures he brought back. They stir weakly in his hand, making faint sounds as their leaves droop, and he wonders aloud whether they have finally woken up. He examines them more closely and notices their condition worsening. The leaves are visibly wilting, and their sluggish movements suggest exhaustion rather than simple sleep. He reasons that being carried around for so long may have drained them. Kneeling beside his cabin, Do-un gently presses them into the ground one by one. He smooths the soil around their roots with careful motions, convinced that planting them properly should help stabilize them. Creatures remain listless even after being planted. Their expressions still look troubled, prompting Do-un to tilt his head in mild confusion as he considers other possible causes, including hunger or stress from being moved without soil. After a brief moment of thought, he decides to share some mana with them. A small, controlled flow of blue energy slips from his fingertip into the earth, curling toward the planted creatures as they react with quiet surprise. Small plant creatures react instantly to the mana. Their wilted leaves perk up, and their bodies glow faintly as they let out cheerful sounds, bouncing slightly in the soil as if filled with renewed energy. Do-un watches them with quiet satisfaction. Their expressions brighten, and he gives a small, amused chuckle, noting that they are still monsters at heart no matter how small and harmless they appear. He turns away from the garden, a subtle tension brushing his senses. A vague unease settles in his chest, and he acknowledges the feeling without fully understanding it yet. As his awareness sharpens, he realizes the presence behind him is not coincidental. Something nearby is watching, and he calmly concludes that this unseen presence must be the machine-type organism the hunters were searching for. Without alarm, Do-un accepts the situation. He decides that whatever the machine-type creature wants will become clear in time. Turning to his cabin, he sets the checks down inside, folding them neatly away and resolving to use the money later when it becomes necessary. The cabin door creaks open, and light spills inside as the man steps in and settles down on the floor. He sets his pack in front of him and calmly prepares to sort through everything he gathered during his outing. He opens the bag and methodically takes stock of its contents. Inside are practical supplies meant for survival, a portable burner and cooking set, gate stones that allow travel between worlds, spare clothes fouled with pollen, and sleeping gear for cold nights. The preparation behind these items is obvious, and he notes with quiet approval how thorough the hunters were. While continuing to organize, his hand pauses when it touches an unexpected item tucked among the supplies. He lifts it out and realizes it is a pack of instant noodles, something entirely out of place compared to the rest of the gear. The sight stirs an old memory. He recalls the last time he ate food like this, back when he was still living in an orphanage. Instead of discomfort, the memory brings a sense of familiarity, and his expression softens as hunger catches up to him. A small smile forms as he decides what to do next. He declares that instant noodles will be his meal for the day, then heads toward the nearby stream, pot in hand, judging the amount of water by feel rather than measurement as he prepares to cook. Water splashes violently as a large fish bursts out from the stream, sending droplets scattering across the grass. The sudden movement draws his attention while he stands nearby holding the pot, momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected interruption. He steadies himself and raises one hand while watching the fish thrash about. As he considers his meal, the thought occurs that instant noodles usually benefit from something extra added in. The fish lunges again, only to be struck down in a single decisive motion. The impact is overwhelming, ending its struggle instantly and leaving the area quiet once more. He recalls that eggs and green onions are commonly added to improve the taste. Looking down, he notices several egg-like objects nearby and decides they should work well enough as substitutes. Since there are no green onions around, he reaches up and plucks fresh leaves from a tree instead. Holding them together with the eggs, he resolves to add them to the pot, satisfied that they are close enough to what the recipe calls for. The pot sloshes gently as he carries it, the water inside already filled with the fish, egg-like contents, and leaves he gathered. Satisfied that everything is ready, he turns back toward the cabin without hesitation. As he walks away, a faint sound comes from behind him. Something taps softly against the ground, unnoticed by him as his footsteps continue steadily forward. Hidden among the bushes, the small machine-type creature watches intently. Its glowing eyes fixate on the pot in his hands, and a single thought forms as it clutches its own core, reacting instinctively to the idea of food. Back at the cabin, he sets the pot onto the portable burner and ignites it. The flame flares to life beneath the metal, and he frowns slightly while thinking about the vague instructions, realizing they never explained when the fish should be added. Deciding it does not matter, he dumps everything into the pot at once and stirs without concern. The improvised table and bench, freshly made from logs, hold steady as he cooks, while nearby the small plant creatures perk up, watching with quiet curiosity. A thin, murky odor drifts outward, curling through the clearing like smoke. The air seems to thicken as it spreads, carrying the sharp, unsettling scent of whatever is boiling in the pot. The small plant-like monsters freeze, their leaves twitching as they sniff the air. Their expressions tighten in confusion and discomfort as the smell reaches them, clearly stronger than expected. The odor continues to spread through the trees, slipping between branches and leaves. It trails upward and outward, lingering as if it has weight of its own. Nearby, the machine-type organism pauses and turns its head, sensors fixed on the drifting scent. A faint mechanical whir accompanies its stillness as it tries to process what it is smelling. The machine raises one foot slightly, hesitating. Hunger registers clearly in its posture, but uncertainty follows immediately after, as it struggles to understand both the strange smell and the idea of food itself. The robot's leg reshapes into a dog's paw, moving slowly and deliberately as it tests the ground before putting its weight down. The sight stirs a distant, detached memory, echoes of sterile facilities and long-ago observations resurfacing from the past. The thought settles into a clear conclusion: people are drawn to dogs. A small, shaggy creature shaped like one stands awkwardly, leaves clinging to its fur, lifting a leg as it limps forward. The posture is clumsy but carefully exaggerated, made to be seen. The idea follows naturally that people help what they pity. The dog-like figure lets out a weak sound and continues limping closer, its movement uneven and attention-seeking. From the table, the man pauses his cooking and turns his gaze toward it, silently taking note. He identifies the creature as the machine-type organism that has been trailing him for some time. As it draws nearer, he considers the possibility that it altered its form to appear harmless, choosing a familiar shape to lower his guard. The dog drops the act and bounds forward, tail wagging and eyes bright, all signs of injury gone. Watching the sudden change, he judges it to be naive and young, and wonders how it ever escaped the lab to reach the demon realm. He chuckles, glancing at the pot and noting the food is almost ready, then casually offers some. The reply is an eager bark. He leans in with chopsticks poised, while the dog stares wide-eyed, drool dripping as it fixates on the steaming broth. A sudden wave of foul-smelling steam rolls out as the lid comes off. Dark fumes coil upward, filling the air while the contents churn below. Unbothered, he declares it's time to eat. They sit side by side at the rough wooden table, each with their own portion. He calmly slurps noodles from the pot, while the dog enthusiastically digs into its plate, tail wagging as it chews with obvious delight. He pauses mid-bite, chewing thoughtfully, while the dog freezes for a moment, noodles dangling from its mouth. Confusion flickers across its face as it processes the taste, echoing his own sudden recognition as a memory from his human days resurfaces. Hazy, sepia-toned memory surfaces. A young boy clutches chopsticks with trembling hands, sweat beading on his cheeks as he slurps noodles that are clearly too hot. Steam curls around his face, and his eyes squeeze shut as he forces the bite down, torn between pain and anticipation. The scene shifts to the present. Do-un pauses, noodles dangling from his chopsticks, then relaxes into a small, genuine smile. The taste settles on his tongue, familiar and comforting, and he admits quietly that it tastes exactly like it used to. A wide view opens over the forest and distant mountains. Dark, inky fumes snake through the air from the cooking pot, labeled as foul and stinking, yet the warm glow of sunset washes over everything. Despite the smell, his simple verdict hangs in the air: delicious. Fumes hit the nearby sprouts at once. One retches, another goes pale and shakes, and the smallest collapses outright. Back in the clearing, the contrast is stark. What overwhelms them is erased for Do-un, drowned out by nostalgia for instant noodles, leaving only satisfaction. The boy finishes eating and calmly tells the small creature that it can leave if it is done, since he needs to clean up the mess. His posture is relaxed, almost casual, as if dismissing an unimportant guest. The dog-like creature immediately reacts, refusing to go. It straightens up and plants its feet, showing stubborn resistance despite its earlier pitiful behavior. The creature turns and starts to walk away across the grass, once again exaggerating its limp. The boy watches from behind, confusion briefly crossing his face as he notices the act resuming. Boy questions the inconsistency, pointing out that the creature had been limping on its left leg earlier. His tone is light, but his observation is sharp and precise. The creature freezes mid-step. Its eyes widen in alarm, sweat forming as it realizes it has been caught. The exaggerated injury suddenly looks far less convincing. After a brief pause, the creature lets out an awkward cough and resumes limping, trying to recover its act. The boy, now amused, lets out a quiet chuckle at the transparent attempt. The creature continues moving away, still limping but with noticeably less confidence. The boy watches silently, clearly entertained by the situation. A tall waterfall pours down a rocky cliff, the sound of rushing water filling the quiet clearing. Mist rises where it crashes into the pool below, surrounded by greenery that frames the secluded spot. Nearby, the protagonist kneels on the grass by the water's edge, striking soaked clothes against a flat stone. He reflects that he has finished washing the dishes and has now moved on to doing his laundry, treating the task as part of a simple routine. As he continues, he admits to himself that he does not like pollen clinging to fabric, yet wearing stiff pieces of leather all the time is no longer an option. The clothes lie spread out beside him, damp and speckled. He slows his movements, gripping the wooden stick more carefully. He reminds himself that hitting the fabric too hard might tear it, deciding to take his time and work gently instead. Despite the caution, he brings the stick down with overwhelming force. The ground beneath him fractures and bursts apart, sending debris flying toward the river. As the impact ripples through the clearing, leaving him momentarily frozen by the result. He pauses mid-thought, his attention shifting as a faint movement catches his eye. His expression tightens slightly, as if bracing himself, and he dismisses the distraction internally before continuing with his task. He realizes that the strange presence has changed again. This time, instead of a sprout or creature, it has taken the form of a small rock. The stone sits there unnaturally clean and intact, as though deliberately placed rather than naturally found. The rock glimmers faintly, sparkling in a way that ordinary stones should not. Despite its harmless appearance, its persistence becomes more noticeable, and irritation begins to creep in as he wonders why it continues to follow him. His thoughts drift back to earlier moments. Even while washing dishes after eating instant noodles, the same presence lingered nearby, quietly existing without interfering, yet never leaving. The memory continues as he recalls standing near flowers resembling forsythia. No matter the form it took, the presence remained close, changing shapes but doing nothing out of the ordinary, quietly accompanying him without explanation. The sudden buzz cuts through the calm of the clearing. A sharp, unnatural sound surges forward, and a small mechanical chimera bolts into motion, flailing its segmented arms wildly as panic takes hold. Its movements are frantic and uncoordinated, driven more by instinct than logic, as it reacts to the presence of a bee. The fear is immediate and overwhelming, disproportionate to the harmless insect, revealing how deeply ingrained and childish the reaction is. A surge of agitation ripples through the chimera. Its eyes glow with alarm, and its body stiffens as if preparing for a threat far greater than reality. The buzzing grows closer, and the chimera recoils, its posture shrinking in on itself. At the same time, a detached observation overlays the moment, noting that despite its mechanical body, its mental state remains underdeveloped, comparable to that of a very young child. Chimera lashes out reflexively, producing an abrupt, forceful clap meant to ward off the perceived danger. The motion is excessive, loud, and clumsy, scattering leaves and petals in the air. This mechanical response contrasts sharply with the quiet forest around them. The hunter stands in the background, watching without intervening, his expression neutral, as though this behavior is expected. After the outburst, the chimera freezes, its body trembles, and it brings its hands together defensively, shrinking back with visible embarrassment and fear. The buzzing insect hovers nearby, harmless and indifferent, while the chimera's reaction escalates far beyond necessity. The hunter's presence remains steady behind it, calm and grounded, reinforcing the imbalance between the chimera's emotional volatility and the reality of the situation. Unable to cope, the chimera retreats, ducking into the cluster of yellow flowers as if they offer protection. It hides clumsily among the blossoms, half visible and clearly ineffective at concealing itself. The hunter exhales softly, his gaze drifting toward the flowers instead of the chimera. With a dry, understated tone, he comments on their beauty, treating the moment as mundane. The contrast emphasizes how the chimera's fear lingers long after the threat has passed, a lingering side effect of a mind burdened with forced knowledge but lacking emotional maturity. After finishing the washing, he holds up the freshly cleaned shirt. Water still drips from the fabric, but it shines from how thoroughly it has been scrubbed. He reflects that doing laundry turned out to be more difficult than expected. Even so, there is a quiet sense of accomplishment in seeing it intact. He examines the shirt more closely while holding it in both hands. The garment looks smaller than he anticipated, and the mismatch between its size and his own build becomes obvious. Despite that, he accepts the result and decides it will have to do for now. Walks into a clearing between trees and hangs the shirt on a rope stretched between them. Sunlight filters through the forest canopy as the shirt sways lightly, still dripping. He notes that it is a shame, considering how much effort he put into washing it. With the shirt left to dry, his attention shifts elsewhere. He turns away from the clothesline, thinking about checking on the mandragoras next, his daily routine continuing without urgency. As he steps away, something stirs behind him. A small rock with glowing eyes quietly moves closer to the hanging shirt. It pauses beneath the clothesline, staring up at the garment in silence, as if observing and waiting. Small robot pulls a loose shirt over its body, carefully sliding it into place. It declares its intention to wear clothes, treating the act with earnest seriousness. With a bright flourish, the robot finishes dressing. Its posture straightens, energy radiating as it proudly claims the shirt as its own, delighted by the transformation. Fabric settles and hair-like strands sway as the form completes its change. The motions are light and celebratory, emphasizing the joy of becoming something new. Now fully human in appearance, it stands barefoot in the grass, fists clenched in excitement. It announces that things are finally perfect. Do-un watches in silence, puzzled. He questions the strange reaction unfolding in front of him. Nearby, the plant-like sprouts groan and wilt. Heat or pressure seems to sap them, their leaves drooping as their roots dry out, clearly struggling under the change. Do-un works the soil in his garden, puzzled. He's certain he removed all the weeds before, yet something feels off as his tool strikes something buried. Digs deeper, flinging soil aside. Creatures and debris burst out, and he realizes the ground was packed with living things beneath the surface. Watching the startled sprouts emerge, he realizes his mistake. Cleaning the surface wasn't enough. He nearly wiped them out by clearing the soil too thoroughly. Standing up, he decides to expand the garden on this side, casually considering making it as large as his house. Faint reaction follows. Someone hesitates nearby, unseen, reacting to his words. From behind a tree, a small girl peeks out nervously, watching him with wide eyes. One understands at once. This time, the mysterious being has taken the form of a girl, and finally seems ready to speak to him. He greets her simply. The girl fidgets behind the trees, then notices the log cabin in the forest and blurts out a question about whether it's his. The sturdy, vine-covered structure looks simple but well cared for. He answers calmly, quiet pride in his expression as it's clear the cabin is his and something he values. The girl's eyes light up as she looks at him anew, pointing in sudden excitement. Living alone here, she assumes he must be a true native of the land. Amused, he lets the misunderstanding stand, confirms it simply, then casually asks which tribe she belongs to. The girl freezes at the question. Her body stiffens, and her face flushes with surprise. She repeats the word tribe as if tasting it for the first time, clearly unsure what it means in this context. Her hands clutch the fabric of her sleeve, and her wide eyes dart around as she struggles to come up with an answer, caught off guard by how serious the question suddenly feels. The girl launches into an excited explanation, pointing emphatically as she claims she comes from beyond a distant waterfall, insisting it is far too far for him to ever find. The man listens calmly, resting his tool on his shoulder. He considers her words, then casually concludes that she must belong to the coconut tribe. Her reaction is instant. She stiffens, then nods vigorously, sweating with nervous excitement as she eagerly confirms his guess and proudly declares herself a member of the coconut tribe. The man chuckles and casually points out that the shirt she's wearing looks just like his. The girl flails in protest, insisting her tribe follows finders keepers, and that the shirt is hers now. He hums, unbothered, and agrees to let her keep it, making her squeal with delight. Standing near the cabin, he asks calmly why someone from the coconut tribe is here. Below him, the girl fidgets nervously before admitting she was kicked out and came to ask for a favor. She suddenly bows forward and blurts out her request, begging to live with him. The force of it makes him lean back in surprise. Repeats her words in disbelief. Up close, she sweats and fidgets, hurriedly listing reasons. No bugs, a house, and safety, trying to reassure him as she waits anxiously for his answer. The man pauses, watching the small girl as she gathers her courage. Her words trail off as she repeats that she wants to live here, her voice hesitant but sincere. He lets out a quiet chuckle, eyes closing briefly, the tension in his posture easing. In his mind, he reaches a simple conclusion. She must have been desperate for somewhere to stay, pushed to this point by circumstances beyond her control. He gives his answer calmly and without ceremony. He agrees, but not unconditionally. He makes it clear that she can stay only if she contributes and does her share. The moment his decision is spoken, the atmosphere brightens. The girl's face lights up instantly, her whole body reacting as if struck by a burst of joy. She clenches her fists in excitement, eyes shining, and eagerly promises that she will do anything he asks of her. The protagonist turns his attention back to his land and explains what needs to be done first. The garden must be plowed so that a proper house can be built for the mandragoras. He gestures toward the patch of ground nearby, the soil still uneven and dotted with stones. He asks plainly if she can help with this task, treating her like a capable helper rather than a burden. The girl answers before he can finish speaking. She rushes forward with boundless confidence, declaring that she is strong and good at this kind of work. She grabs the wooden tool without hesitation, her small hands wrapping firmly around it. Her expression is fierce and proud, as if this is a chance to prove her worth rather than a chore. Without waiting for further instruction, she slams the tool into the ground with explosive force. The earth erupts outward, dirt, rocks, and roots flying in all directions as the soil is torn open in an instant. Her hair whips wildly from the impact, and her determined face shows not a hint of strain. The sheer power of the blow makes it clear that her strength far exceeds what her small frame suggests, transforming a simple task into a startling display of raw ability. Watches the girl dash across the freshly turned soil, scattering dirt and leaves with unrestrained energy. As he observes her, he realizes she isn't hiding anything. Her strength, odd habits, and excitement are all on full display. It dawns on him that she doesn't know how to behave like an ordinary child. Raised in a laboratory, she lacks learned restraint and social caution, acting instead with raw honesty, guided by instinct and curiosity. He calls out to her and introduces himself as Do-un Cheon, asking for her name. The girl freezes mid-motion and turns back slowly, confusion flickering across her face. The idea of having a name is unfamiliar to her, and the question leaves her visibly unsettled. She admits she has no name and decides on the spot to create one for herself. Her thoughts drift to a memory of a beautiful flower she once saw. From that image she chooses the name Nari Kim. She announces it proudly, brimming with joy at having claimed an identity of her own, even as she quickly corrects Do-un when he mishears it. With the task finished, Nari declares the work complete. The ground has been neatly leveled, enclosed by a sturdy ring of stones that Do-un assembled into a fence with remarkable speed. Standing beside her, he notes how quickly it was done, while the newly prepared garden lies ready for what will come next. The mandragoras wriggle happily in the freshly prepared soil, their small bodies bouncing as if celebrating their new home. Their leaves sway and flutter, clearly responding to the care they have been given. Watching them, Do-un feels a quiet sense of regret, realizing he should have created a proper space for them much earlier. Nari stands nearby, silent, her expression unreadable. A faint sound draws Do-un's attention. He lifts his head slightly, sensing something off. As he listens more closely, he hears the unmistakable sound of sniffling and turns toward Nari, confusion crossing his face. Nari stands with her shoulders drawn inward, tears welling and spilling over as she struggles to contain her emotions. Her small hands tremble at her sides, and her face tightens as she cries openly. Do-un asks why she is crying, clearly caught off guard by the sudden shift. Through her tears, Nari explains that seeing the mandragoras together reminded her of her friends. The words come out unevenly, each one heavy with emotion. Do-un is stunned by this, repeating the idea to himself in disbelief. In his mind, the thought clashes violently with everything he knows about the laboratory, a place where companionship should not have existed. Before he can fully process the thought, Nari's expression darkens. Her eyes widen, and a sharp sense of panic takes hold. The realization hits her all at once, overwhelming her, and her breathing falters as fear replaces sadness in an instant. Dark, distorted shapes curl in from the edges, and a chorus of distant, echoing cries rolls through the forest, making the entire clearing feel like it's being watched. As the forest darkens to a blood-red hue, nightmarish howls echo around them. Do-un Cheon remains calm, explaining that such sounds are common and nothing to fear. Nari, still shaking, reveals what truly frightened her, a chick-like monster already wounded and bitten. Her strained words make Do-un's expression harden as he grasps what she saw. Do-un looks upward, thoughtful but grim, acknowledging that such a creature would likely be devoured soon in this realm. He bluntly states the reality of the demon world. Nari clutches her head, sparks of pain flashing through her expression. When he asks if she wants to save that monster, her conditioning overwhelms her. She recoils, insisting she cannot save a monster at all. The narration makes it clear that the lab's brainwashing still binds her, preventing her from acting on her own will. Do-un kneels in the grass, lowering himself to the girl's eye level. He thinks carefully about how to help without sounding commanding, then gently suggests they go together. The girl freezes in surprise, startled by his tone. Without warning, she launches herself upward, shouting that she will be right back. Her small body shoots into the sky, leaving Do-un staring after her in disbelief. Elsewhere, the land is bathed in red light as insect-like monsters clash violently. Blades and limbs collide in a chaotic struggle, and one small, white creature lies injured on the ground, crying weakly. Girl bursts into the fight, screaming for the monsters to leave it alone. She strikes decisively, knocking an attacker aside while the injured creature recoils in shock. She clenches her fist, tears welling in her eye, and steels herself. In a quiet, resolute thought, she vows to save it. In a dim corridor, a small robot stands alone, clutching a yellow, chick-like creature to its chest. Two human figures loom at the edges, their faces tense and shadowed. The robot reports flatly that the subject has won another rank battle. The humans speak offhandedly about the implications. At this pace, they conclude the creature will be assigned to experiments designed to fail. The words hang heavy, indifferent to consequence. The yellow creature lies motionless on the tiled floor, curled in on itself. Feathers are ruffled, bits scattered around it, emphasizing its helpless state. Violence erupts as angry shouts accuse it of stealing victories. Blows rain down from all sides. The robot crouches and shields itself, weakly asking why as it insists it only followed orders. The strikes continue, its voice breaking as it admits the pain and begs for it to stop. A massive force crashes down into the floor, shattering stone and sending debris flying. The impact silences everything for a split second. A shout cuts through the chaos, commanding everyone to stop. At the same moment, a powerful strike explodes outward, flinging fragments and green fluid through the air as an attacker is violently repelled. The thought forms sharply as violence flashes in his mind. Ganging up on someone is wrong. The image pairs that judgment with a sudden, forceful strike, emphasizing how unfair and overwhelming such attacks are. The follow-up thought lands just as hard. The act is not merely wrong but outright bad, underscored by a brutal impact that sends debris and green fluid scattering as something is struck down. Back in the cabin, Do-un kneels calmly in the soil, tending to small sprouts. Blue mana flows gently from his hand into the plants, nurturing them as they respond and steady themselves. His expression is relaxed as he asks casually whether they like the treatment. Voice calls out urgently from behind him. He turns, rising from his crouch with mild surprise, noting how quickly something seems to have happened elsewhere. The girl clutches the small white creature tightly, panic overtaking her face. Tears spill as she asks what they should do, her voice strained with fear. She shakes the creature slightly, desperate, saying it will not wake up. Do-un moves to calm her, telling her to settle down, but his words trail off as something catches his attention. His eyes widen, and a bead of sweat forms as recognition stirs. He focuses on the creature more closely, the unease deepening. A vague memory surfaces, and he wonders where he has seen this monster before, sensing that it is not as unfamiliar as it first seemed. The small girl panics as she clutches the limp creature in her arms. Tears spill freely down her face, her body trembling as fear takes hold. She looks upward in desperation, unable to understand why it will not wake no matter how tightly she holds it. She squeezes the creature closer, her hands shaking as she tries to rouse it. Its body hangs slack, eyes unfocused and spinning, showing no sign of awareness. Sweat and dirt mark its fur, suggesting it has already been pushed past its limit. Standing a short distance away in the open field, the protagonist turns toward her distress. The girl sobs openly now, voicing her fear that the creature is badly hurt and may not survive. Her small frame looks even more fragile against the wide stretch of grass. He steps closer and extends his hand, his movement careful and deliberate. A faint, controlled energy gathers around his fingers as he prepares to examine the creature rather than act hastily. He places his hand firmly on the creature, sending a surge of power through it. After a brief moment, his expression settles, reassured by what he senses. He determines that despite its condition, it has not suffered any serious injuries. As his awareness deepens, he examines the creature's demon energy more closely. He recognizes that every monster carries its own distinct biodata, and this one's energy has clearly changed. It has condensed, becoming smaller and brighter, yet its identity is unmistakable to him. Conclusion settles in his mind as he compares it to past encounters. This energy pattern matches that of the immortal-type monster he once faced before. Though its form is reduced, the essence remains the same, confirming what it truly is. He studies the creature in his hands, then considers the difference between its condition and his own regenerative abilities. Questions form as he wonders why it shrank so drastically and whether its method of recovery differs from his. The girl looks up at him anxiously, still holding the creature close, her worry unabated. He reassures her by explaining that the creature is not dying but suffering from a lack of nourishment. Its diminished size has made it difficult for it to sustain itself. Explains further that the mana he supplied will allow the creature to recover on its own over time. The girl listens in silence, her expression softening slightly as she processes his words, holding the small creature carefully as hope begins to replace her fear. A bleak memory surfaces in her mind, unbidden and heavy. In a sterile corridor from the past, a small mechanical figure once stood alone, holding a weakened creature while adults loomed on either side, their faces tight with fear and impatience. The image of the creature collapsed on the floor, drained and discarded, lingers as a reminder of what neglect leads to. Back in the present, the girl lifts the small creature toward him to show its condition. Its body droops limply in her hands, soft and unstable, barely holding its shape. Her fear sharpens as she insists that it will not survive if nothing is done. She pulls the creature tightly against her chest, refusing to let go. Her voice trembles as she asks for permission to keep it, her resolve forming through tears. She promises care, training, and food, clinging to it as though separation alone might seal its fate. The protagonist lets out a quiet laugh, the tension easing from his expression. He calmly reminds her that the creature will grow far larger as it recovers, watching her reaction carefully rather than dismissing her concern. He hesitates only briefly before adjusting her resolve, deciding she will simply feed it less if it grows too big. Amused and unconcerned, he gives his approval without resistance. Her face brightens instantly, disbelief turning into joy as he adds that the creature can stay nearby and eventually help protect the house, sealing her relief and excitement. The small creature stirs for the first time. Its eyes flutter open slowly, unfocused and heavy, as awareness creeps back in. Confusion overwhelms it, and a weak sound escapes as it struggles to understand where it is. As its senses sharpen, it notices a human figure standing nearby. The man's presence registers instantly, triggering alarm and disbelief. Recognition follows just as quickly, tied to an old memory of loss and fear, and the creature stiffens despite its weakened state. Held securely in the girl's arms, the creature looks up and notices her face hovering close. Her wide, bright eyes are filled with curiosity and relief rather than hostility. The creature freezes, unsettled by the unfamiliar warmth and gentleness. Girl lights up when the creature wakes, lifting it high in delight and announcing its recovery. The creature panics in her hands, crying out as it flails and looks around in disbelief. Being held so casually by a human child in the demon realm shatters everything it knows, leaving it shocked and confused. The girl hugs the small creature tightly, celebrating its survival, until it lets out a strained cry. It suddenly wriggles free and shoots upward, flailing and shouting in protest. The man freezes in surprise as he realizes he can understand its words. The protagonist pauses, surprised by this realization, as the creature continues its frantic complaints. The ability to comprehend its words settles in, confirming that the creature's recovery has reached a meaningful threshold. Time passes quietly as the creature fully stabilizes. The girl announces with satisfaction that it is completely healed, while the creature, now wrapped up, struggles weakly on the wooden surface, still protesting its treatment. Nearby, a pot of water sits ready, hinting at her next plans. Brimming with confidence, the girl declares she has chosen a name, inspired by the sounds the creature keeps making. She excitedly names it Caillou, prompting the creature to recoil in outrage and protest fiercely, insisting it already has a name, even as it springs about in agitation. The girl tips the pot without hesitation, pouring a rush of water over the small creature. It reacts instantly, its body swelling and distorting as the water floods over it, eyes bulging as it gulps more than it can handle. Startled, the girl looks to the man as the creature swells and weakly protests, water spilling from it as it struggles. The man stays calm, realizing she can't understand its words, and stops things before it gets worse. Certain the issue is hunger, the girl suddenly decides to find food and runs off, leaving the soaked creature behind. Left alone with the quiet yard and the scattered logs, the man turns his attention to practical matters. Acknowledging that he has accumulated more supplies than before, he decides to build a cabinet to store them, already gauging the size as he draws his blade and begins cutting the timber to shape. The protagonist pauses and studies the logs laid out on the grass, frowning as he reflects on why his earlier work felt off. He compares the pieces quietly, noticing inconsistencies he had overlooked when shaping the table and chair. Atop the table, the small creature offers an observation in its strained voice, pointing out that the logs differ in color. It explains that the piece directly in front of him is softer than the others, its tone carrying a hint of impatience. Understanding dawns on the man as he processes this explanation. He realizes the brittleness changes depending on the type of tree, mentally correcting his assumptions. The creature reacts with smug disbelief that this had not been obvious to him from the start. Curious now, the man asks which color of tree produces the strongest wood. The creature begins to answer confidently, stating that it is obviously red, before abruptly cutting itself off as a realization strikes. The creature freezes, stunned by its own mistake, suddenly aware that the man has understood its words clearly. As the man repeats the answer and turns to scan the surrounding forest for suitable trees, the creature reels in disbelief, realizing that its speech is no longer hidden from him. The small creature steels itself, bouncing slightly as if gathering courage. It decides that the situation is impossible, yet resolves to peer into the man's thoughts just in case, driven by unease and suspicion. A strange force spreads outward as the creature activates its ability. An unseen current surges through its awareness, signaling the use of mind reading as it reaches toward the man's consciousness. The attempt collapses instantly. The creature's inner vision fractures, as though it struck something overwhelming and alien. In its shock, it senses that the mind-reading attempt was brushed aside effortlessly, leaving it shaken. Gaining composure, the man speaks calmly, stating that he sees no red trees nearby. His words confirm that he understood the earlier remark, even without any visible effort. The creature stiffens in place, fear and disbelief flooding in. With its eyes fixed on him, it asks directly whether he can understand its words, no longer able to ignore the truth staring back at it. The protagonist explains calmly that it is not exactly understanding in the usual sense. He clarifies that what he hears is the creature's voice rendered as human speech, as if its meaning is being translated directly into words he can comprehend. He continues, pointing out that the strange part is not his ability, but the fact that a monster is capable of speaking human language at all. The creature stiffens on the tabletop, sweat beading as it struggles to respond, clearly unsettled by the direction of the conversation. Inside its thoughts, the creature concludes that the man must be an intelligent monster himself, an exceptionally rare existence. It recalls that such beings are usually only spoken of in rumors, making this encounter its first time truly facing one. Man lowers his gaze and speaks as though addressing an old acquaintance, stating that they have met before. The creature, startled, confirms this and admits it had wanted to meet him again, its composure wavering. The man asks why, and the creature answers with quiet sincerity. It remembers how the man once saved its life, explaining that its immortal core remained intact because the poison had been removed when the man took its hide. That act allowed it to survive, and it had resolved to repay that debt if their paths ever crossed again. The protagonist accepts the explanation without hesitation and immediately decides to take advantage of it. He states that since the creature owes him, it can start helping right away. The creature freezes, caught off guard, and reacts with visible confusion at the sudden demand. A slow grin spreads across the creature's face as it processes the situation. After a brief pause, it agrees, its demeanor shifting from anxious to eager, clearly ready to act. Without warning, the creature releases a burst of power and propels itself forward. Its small body moves with surprising force as it declares it will guide the man to the red trees, leading the way decisively. The forest ahead erupts in violent flashes of fire. Explosions tear through the trees in rapid succession, flames blooming outward as the ground trembles under the shockwaves. Mid the chaos, the young girl sprints away from the blazing destruction, terror driving her forward. Fire roars close behind her, heat licking at her back as she screams and runs, desperately begging not to be taken back to the laboratory while the inferno closes in. An explosion engulfs the clearing in fire and debris, the shockwave ripping through the ground with searing heat. When the smoke clears, the girl lies face down and still. Terror floods her as she realizes the lab attackers have found her again. She lifts her head, eyes glowing with terror, tears spilling as she gasps for air. The flames roar behind her, and she breaks down, overwhelmed by the fire and the certainty that she is being hunted. She doesn't know how to escape and can only cry out in fear. Not far away, a device lights up in a gloved hand. A radar screen pulses as it locks onto her position, confirming the target. The calm, methodical precision of the hunters stands in stark contrast to the chaos they've created. A tall man steps forward through the inferno, flames curling around his body without touching him. Fire gathers in his hand as he advances, his expression cold and resolute. He acknowledges the grim necessity of attacking a child, but makes it clear he has no intention of stopping. His own life is on the line, and he releases the blazing force without hesitation. The girl's mind collapses under fear. Convinced there is no escape, she stares ahead in despair as firelight reflects in her wide, shaking eyes. Her thoughts spiral toward the certainty that everything is ending here. Another explosion erupts, flames surging across the ground. As the heat bears down, the protagonist steps forward and raises a hand, releasing a controlled force that slices through the fire and disperses it, as if brushing away a minor nuisance. He acknowledges, almost absently, that he had planned to finish building the cabinet and eat. The interruption irritates him, but he places that aside without hesitation. Nearby, the small creature watches from his shoulder, its eyes sharp and alert. The creature promises to reveal the location of the red trees later, but agrees with the man's priority. The man's gaze settles on the trembling child as he decides the immediate task. The fire must be extinguished first, and saving the child comes before everything else. The man wreathed in flames turns his attention fully toward the intruder. He scoffs at the man's rough appearance and quickly pieces together the situation, concluding that this stranger must be protecting the machine-type organism. Impatience sharpens his expression as he signals he has no interest in prolonging the encounter. Smoke drifts across the open clearing as cliffs loom in the distance. The girl crouches behind the man while flames crackle near the hunter ahead. The man stands calmly between them and dismisses the threat outright, his composure making it clear he has no intention of retreating. Anger flares. The fire-wielding hunter throws his head back and roars, flames surging violently around his body. Power gathers beneath his feet as he channels it downward, preparing to launch an attack meant to overwhelm through sheer force. Before the flames can reach their target, the man lifts a single finger. A sharp, focused light ignites at its tip, steady and precise. The small creature on his shoulder watches intently, unblinking. In that instant, it becomes clear that the incoming assault will not be met with brute force, but with something far more controlled. Man's fingertip bloomed with a cold blue light that cut through the heat like a knife. That focused beam met the hunter's roaring inferno and, for a heartbeat, sound and pressure tore the air apart. The collision detonated. Rock and flame exploded outward in a blinding, violent burst that sent shards and embers raining down. The hunter staggered from the force, stunned and thrown off balance as the ground under him fractured. Dazed and wide-eyed, he watched the sky where the impact had just been, the certainty of his power cracking for the first time. Panic and disbelief flashed across his face. His attack had failed, fragments of stone rain down while he screams, panic replacing fury. The power he unleashed is completely erased, leaving only shock and fear as he is driven back. Chunks of stone and dirt fell through the shaken air, tumbling toward the scarred clearing with a chorus of terrified screams from the collapsing terrain. When the dust settled, the man turned away from the ruin and asked the child how she felt. Little girl wiped her tears, sniffed, and, still trembling, managed that she felt better now, the fear slowly receding. The protagonist speaks calmly to Nari, explaining that fear should be handled directly. His words carry an unsettling simplicity as the body of an enemy lies face down in the dirt before them, limbs splayed and unmoving. Dust drifts in the air while his footsteps approach without hesitation. As he continues, his hand reaches down and grips the enemy by the hair. The gesture is casual and controlled, reinforcing his point as though this is a routine lesson rather than a violent act. He lifts the body with a sharp motion, stating that if the source of fear wakes again, it should simply be dealt with once more. The figure rises helplessly, hair stretched taut in his grasp. For a brief moment his expression shifts. His eyes widen slightly, confusion breaking through his composed demeanor as something unexpected registers. Face pressed to the ground, the attacker cries out in panic, "No, my hair!" As the truth is revealed, a bald scalp with a strange mark and a flashing implant where the hair used to be. The man stares, dumbfounded for a beat, then blurts out aloud, "What the heck?" The ruined wig dangles from his hand while the stunned attacker lies exposed and defeated. The three of them look down at the fallen hunter in silence. The absence of hair becomes obvious, and the realization spreads quickly. What had seemed threatening moments ago now feels strangely absurd, especially given how young the man appears beneath the disguise. Light reflects off the exposed scalp, leaving no doubt about what had been hidden. The truth settles in plainly, stripped of menace and mystery. A brief pause follows, then the tension breaks. A small, hesitant sound escapes, followed by another, as amusement begins to replace fear. Nari bursts into laughter, clutching her face as tears well from laughing too hard. The fear that had gripped her moments earlier dissolves completely, replaced by childish glee at the discovery. As the laughter continues, the man extends his hand again, the remnants of heat still lingering around him. Behind him, Nari instinctively covers her ears, but she no longer looks frightened. Quiet thought forms about her reaction, noting that despite being stronger, she had frozen earlier, overwhelmed not by weakness but by fear itself. The explanation continues as faint golden energy coils and hums to life. The ability allows direct access to a target's memories, the glow reflecting in a single eye as it deepens. It can even pass what is seen to another, extending the intrusion beyond one mind. In a dark, sealed room filled with equipment, a man in a lab coat leans over a console. His posture is relaxed, almost pleased, as if the unfolding events are proceeding exactly as intended. Man lifts his head, revealing a wide, unsettling grin behind reflective lenses. Satisfaction radiates from him, his expression suggesting control rather than curiosity. On a nearby surface, a small, amorphous creature trembles and shifts, its body wobbling as if struggling to maintain form. The observer concludes that the creature has developed consciousness, no longer behaving like a simple object or tool. A sudden, sharp sound breaks the moment as power discharges. The presence that had been restrained reacts violently, the energy flaring as if something inside has been triggered. The protagonist gently pats Nari's head, his calm presence offering reassurance. He knows trauma doesn't vanish overnight, but this moment still marks a small, meaningful step forward. He straightens and shifts his attention to the subdued man, calmly considering what should be done next. The question is directed outward, signaling that the immediate danger has passed. Nari's mood abruptly brightens. Her fear is replaced by excitement as she reacts with sudden inspiration, confidently declaring that she has come up with a good idea. Nari suddenly speaks up with confidence, declaring that water puts out fire, and announcing that the bald man is no longer frightening. Her voice carries excitement rather than fear, marking a clear shift from earlier terror. Water crashes down over the restrained man, drenching him completely. He hangs stiffly beneath the torrent, water streaming from his face and clothes as his expression empties of all resistance. Inside his mind, frustration surfaces at how far the situation has drifted from his original purpose. From a distance, the protagonist stands near the water with a pot in his hands, looking faintly awkward. He reflects that Nari may recover faster than expected, surprised by how quickly her mood has lifted. He steps into the shallow water, filling the container as it sloshes around his legs. The small winged creature flutters nearby, watching in confusion as the pot is dipped and drawn back up. Nari clenches her fists and announces her enthusiasm for instant noodles, praising their taste with childlike intensity. The protagonist responds calmly, acknowledging her excitement as he finishes collecting the water. The protagonist remarks casually that he hadn't realized the coconut tribe also ate fish-flavored instant noodles. From above the river, Nari reacts with sudden excitement, startled but eager, immediately affirming that they love instant noodles very much. Water erupts violently as something heavy crashes into the river. The restrained man is jolted by the impact, irritation sharpening into a deep scowl as water splashes up around him. In his thoughts, he assesses the situation, concluding that the hunter nearby must be at least a rank. Nari plunges into the river without hesitation, determined and fearless. She announces her intention to catch fish, splashing loudly as she disappears beneath the surface. Nearby, the man continues filling the pot, unfazed, while the captive reasons that the hunter must be far stronger than he appears and deliberately concealing his abilities. The captive's thoughts continue as he hangs there, incredulous. He assumes the man must be a solitary hunter operating independently, and irritation builds at the absurdity of the situation. He fumes internally at the idea of instant noodles being prepared while he is left dangling and ignored in the demon realm. The river explodes upward as Nari bursts from the water, gripping 2 thrashing fish in her hands. Water streams from her hair and clothes as she shouts triumphantly, proudly declaring that she has caught fish, her earlier fear completely replaced by joy and confidence. Protagonist calmly decides that only 1 fish will be added and that the rest should be released. Below, the restrained man hanging near the waterfall reacts with confusion, unable to understand the logic unfolding in front of him. Above, the restrained man watches in confusion. As the pot nears, the captive stiffens, sweat forming as he wonders if they realize how overpowering the fishy taste will be if a monster like that is added. One of the fish is dropped into the pot with a splash, water sloshing violently against the metal. The captive's disbelief deepens as he fixates on the amount of water inside, wondering why so much was gathered for something as simple as noodles. From a distance, Nari dashes forward across the grass, arms spread wide and face glowing with excitement. She cheers happily, already imagining the instant noodles, while the man follows behind at an unhurried pace, carrying the pot. Suddenly, a sharp command halts everything. The moment freezes as both the man and Nari stop in place, the excitement cut short by an abrupt interruption that demands immediate attention. The restrained man thrashes violently against his bindings, water exploding around him as panic takes over. Desperation breaks through his pride, and he starts pleading for his freedom, offering cooperation in exchange for being released. Sudden stillness replaces the chaos. Under a stark, isolating light, the man now stands before a rough wooden table, momentarily frozen as the situation shifts beyond his expectations. The atmosphere grows heavy, pressing down on him as if judgment itself has arrived. Gloved hands tear open a packet of instant noodles with deliberate care. The sound is sharp and final, and the act carries an unsettling weight, as though something far more important than a meal is about to be decided. The man stares down at the round block of dried noodles resting in his hands. His body trembles uncontrollably, sweat running down his face, as he realizes the absurd yet terrifying seriousness of what is unfolding. Grim vision fills his thoughts. The hunter and the child sit silently with glowing, ominous eyes, their presence overwhelming and inescapable. The man is struck by the certainty that, in this moment, his survival hinges entirely on these instant noodles. The restrained man steels himself, realizing he must not complicate things. He convinces himself that the only way forward is to keep everything simple and to follow the instructions exactly as written, clinging to the idea that precision might save him. He decides to judge the amount of water by instinct alone, acknowledging that he has no alternative since the noodles are meant to serve 3 portions. The pot soon reaches a rolling boil, bubbles churning violently as heat builds beneath it. He recalls the instructions step by step. First, the noodles and soup powder are added to the boiling water. His hands move carefully, sliding the block of noodles into the pot and emptying the seasoning without hesitation, determined not to miss a single step. The next instruction echoes in his mind as the contents continue to boil. He keeps the pot heated for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds, forcing himself to remain focused while his heart pounds steadily in his chest. He begins counting his own heartbeats to measure the time, noting that his heart beats 60 times a minute. With grim concentration, he calculates that reaching 270 heartbeats will produce the most optimal cooking time, counting each pulse as though his life truly depends on it. A sudden command echoes as noodles are flung upward. The strands arc through the air in a dramatic burst, hot broth scattering as the man shouts instructions with absolute confidence, treating cooking like a combat technique. Blunt, almost instructional message appears, stressing the importance of exposing the noodles to air. The strands stretch and twist mid-flight, gleaming as steam rises, promising a springy, chewy texture. Close on the man's eyes as he watches the noodles carefully. Sweat beads at his brow while his thoughts wander to how perfect this would be with kimchi, only to be cut short by the reminder that this is the demon realm. Faint grin forms. He accepts the limitations of the situation without regret, satisfied that he has done everything possible. The pot settles back down, steam rolling thickly from the surface. Inside, the noodles simmer in a rich, red broth, glowing warmly as heat radiates upward. A status-like display highlights the finished dish, presenting the instant noodles as a perfected result, complete with exaggerated qualities and an almost triumphant sense of completion. From above the pot, the girl and the protagonist look down as a small white creature flutters anxiously over the steaming noodles. She notes it looks different, and he calmly agrees, allowing the moment to settle into a brief, peaceful pause. The protagonist lifts a small bundle of noodles with his chopsticks, bringing it toward his mouth with cautious focus. He pauses briefly, intent on judging the result of all the effort poured into the pot. From above, the 3 gather around the rough wooden table. Each of them eats in silence, drawing noodles into their mouths, the simple act repeated again and again as steam rises gently from the bowls. The moment the taste reaches them, their expressions change at once. Shock ripples through all 3, eyes widening as the flavor overwhelms their expectations, and something unspoken passes between them. A brilliant sensation floods their minds. The taste blooms into something almost unreal, lifting them into a shared moment of awe as they finally understand what instant noodles are meant to be. Back at the table, Nari leans forward, breathless with excitement, marveling at how incredible the food is and stunned by the thought that humans can eat something like this every day. The man admits his own surprise and calmly urges them to finish eating first, letting the moment settle as the bowls slowly empty. The small white creature lies on the wooden table, round and full, letting out a satisfied burp. Empty bowls and the pot nearby show the meal has already ended, leaving only traces of broth behind. At the table, the group has settled into a calm aftermath. The armored man scratches the back of his head with an awkward laugh and asks how the food was. The girl quietly notes that it is already gone, while the creature rests contentedly nearby. The armored man's smile fades into hesitation. He pauses, eyes widening slightly, as if weighing something important he did not expect to say. Across the table, the protagonist sits with chopsticks in hand, staring at his empty bowl. He admits plainly that the food was so good he felt guilty eating it for free, his tone sincere rather than joking. He follows up by telling the man to say what he wants, promising he will do his best to make it happen. The offer hangs in the air, heavy with possibility. The armored man gulps, sweat forming as emotion overtakes him. In the next moment, he drops to his knees in front of the table, bowing deeply and begging to be taught, his desperation and admiration laid completely bare. The hunter blurts out his declaration, introducing himself as Giziak Nam and openly admitting his desire to become as strong as the man before him. His voice is earnest, almost desperate, laid bare without shame. The protagonist looks down at him with a mix of surprise and mild discomfort. He tells him not to call him sir, and questions where this sudden devotion is coming from, clearly caught off guard by the intensity. Giziak kneels on the grass while the protagonist and Nari sit at the table. Giziak continues, explaining that someone capable of building a house here must be on a long-term mission, reinforcing his assumption that the man is extraordinary. Giziak grows louder and more animated, insisting that he knows how to cook and even has a license to prove it. The protagonist immediately shuts that claim down in thought, flatly contradicting him. Giziak doubles down, shouting that his father runs a fried chicken shop and swearing he isn't lying. Still kneeling, Giziak pleads his case more carefully. He says he understands how troublesome it must be to travel back and forth to the human world for supplies and offers to handle that burden himself. Finally, he states his true wish outright. He wants to become an A-class hunter through the protagonist's training. Protagonist listens in silence, then calmly turns the conversation in a different direction, asking why Giziak attacked Nari in the first place, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Giziak hesitates when Nari's name is mentioned and awkwardly asks if that refers to the machine-type being. The protagonist quietly urges him to lower his voice and go along with her story, while Nari, oblivious, tips the pot and checks if there is anything left to eat. Giziak answers that he cannot explain his reason in detail because it is personal. His eyes tremble, moisture gathering as his emotions surface. Suddenly explodes with feeling, shouting that he does not care about the reward or Nari at all. He pounds his hands into the ground, declaring that nothing matters as long as he can pass the hunter advancement test. The protagonist calmly tells him to get up. Giziak freezes, tears clinging to his eyes, confused by the sudden shift. The hunter stands and accepts the proposal in his own way, saying the deal works for him if it means good food. He suggests sparring first, noting their previous fight ended too quickly. Giziak looks up in shock and gratitude, overwhelmed as the path he begged for finally opens. Nari speaks up, asking to spar with Giziak as well. The pot on the table settles with a dull clank, and the hunter checks on her, worried about whether she will be all right. Nari beams with excitement and repeats something she was told earlier. Whatever scares her just needs to pass out. She grips the pot proudly and declares that she wants to try putting out the fire herself. Giziak laughs nervously and downplays her words, insisting he is not weak and that his master is simply far stronger than he is. His confidence turns into a smug chuckle, while Nari glares at him in silence. The protagonist interrupts and addresses Giziak by name. He gestures toward a massive dark stone nearby and calmly asks if Giziak can break it. Giziak panics when he realizes what the stone is, explaining that it is a black bluestone, far tougher than diamond. The hunter presses him for a clear answer, leaving Giziak visibly shaken as he understands what is being demanded. The bald trainee forces a nervous laugh and holds his hands up like he's trying to calm a tense room. He jokes that the stone is a black bluestone and that only an A-class could break it, but sweat beads at his temples and his voice trembles. The bravado is paper-thin. Everything erupts. The stone slams into the ground with a thunderous impact that throws him off his feet. Dirt and shards fly in every direction as the trainee is blasted back, his body knocked rigid by the raw force. The sound and shock rip through the clearing. He lies stunned, eyes wild and sweating, barely able to comprehend what just happened. His mouth parts in a single broken question, how, while panic and disbelief crawl across his face. Nari plants both feet on the bench and challenges him without hesitation. She calls him forward and words of invitation turn into action. Water and droplets swirl around her hands as she readies herself. Her expression is fierce and delighted all at once. She dares him to fight.